if you're envisioning X person watching a replay being like, what the hell is he doing? This is so bad. Realistically, you're somehow able to be at peace and accepting of people thinking you're terrible, then it's not going to hold you back.
Today, we will be chatting with mixed game specialist Benny Glaser. Benny is the reigning champion for most SCOOP and WCOOP titles won and has dominated the World Series of Poker by winning 5 bracelets.
Thankfully, for SCOOP and WCOOP, they have the dedicated day off on Friday. I absolutely always take that day off. I think it would be borderline insanity not to. If I'm playing a final table and it's 4 or 5 p.m. for me, rather than like 1 or 2 a.m. in Europe, for example. So I think that's important.
For you, how do you make sure your focus is where you want it to be for final tables late in the grinds?
Things that I used to do that I think made it something tougher for me, post on social media that I made a final table. Because, I want to be like, this is a cool thing. Like, support is nice. But I realized that even things surrounding that probably adds things to me and to my brain that it probably hinders me. Especially, like, I might get messages coming in about it and it's like a distraction. Heads up, it's a tough game, man. Like, you can't hide. Definitely kind of made me question my ability a lot in some aspects.
What do you actually do? Do you have like a SOS shit? Nothing worked. What do? I have to perform in 5 minutes.
Screaming is great if you have the chance. Shout into a pillow if there's someone for 20 seconds is beautiful. A way to get out some tilt if you really want to.
Thank you guys for tuning in to what's going to be another great episode of the Mechanics of Poker podcast. Quick announcement, we have seats open for our Mechanics of Poker coaching program. If you want to work with me and Adam and have us help you make more progress in your poker career, you can apply using the link down below or go over to mechanicsofpoker.com. Without further ado, guys, enjoy this episode. Benny, I was going over your hand and mob, and something actually stood out to me about your recent results. I saw that on March 6th, you final tabled 100k at PokerGo, won a nice little 225k. But just 1 month later, you're in Bratislava playing a 250 euro and a 400 euro mixed game event. You must really love this game.
Yeah, that was a bit of fun, really. It wasn't exactly for the money and EV that I went there, really. That was more kind of a social stop with friends. But yeah, mixed games are fun. Generally, I prefer them live, and I like supporting them. I thought that was going to be a good environment to do that. And yeah, it was nice to kind of show my face there and support the Norwegian guys as well. They're big advocate for mixed games.
So it's because I guess in the bigger stops you're kind of forced to play more no limit hold'em, even though you prefer mixed games, simply because they don't offer enough mixed games.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I definitely would rather play more mixed games if I could, or probably only always if I could, if that's all they offered. But yeah, sort of subjected to have to play them as well.
What made poker such a great game, and what attracted you to it?
So initially, some of the things that attracted me to it was just the mental challenge of it, where I'm trying to get better, just both as myself as a way of improving, and essentially trying to just be better than other people, trying to outsmart them. The challenge of trying to work that out, trying to work out how to be better than someone at the game is something that attracted me to it, as well as obviously the potential money earning side of it. But in that way that it's just a pure outwitting someone else game, that it's just a cerebral game is what attracted me to it, and is what I think makes it a great game. Yeah.
You said the first thing you said that it's like a challenge against yourself, whereas, I often feel like a lot of people need a certain level of opposition to get like into flow, right? To play well. But you were out there in Bratislava playing a 250 euro event, 400 euro event. And now you're also talking about, the challenge is actually against yourself. Do you feel like you're able to find your A game purely from challenging yourself? Or do you still need like some sort of level of competition to really get in the zone?
Yeah, good question. I would say generally in Bratislava and the kind of small ones, I probably wasn't playing my A game. Although there were like a couple of like very skilled players who were in there still as well. That still provided a challenge. For example, who I got three-handed with is also very good. Um, but yeah, I think my A game generally would rise to when the competition is best. Um, at least I think so. In general, like I can maybe default to a more theoretical kind of fundamentally sound game rather than if you call like a game might be like in a way of taking every possible kind of edge, finding every little exploit in a way as well. So it depends how hard I might be trying to do that too.
When you say your biggest opponent, actually, I think it was a Conor McGregor quote actually that said like the biggest opponent is yourself. Pretty sure actually. When you play against Benny, what is the biggest challenge?
When you say you being me, right, as opposed to the royal you.
No, so like you said like basically the if we think about we obviously we have the opposition that we have to beat, but we also have to beat kind of the game with ourselves, right? The game in our mind. So what's tough about the challenge, Benny?
So to clarify, you're kind of asking what my obstacles that I face about myself, like where I might be holding myself back in a way.
Yeah.
Tough questions. I would say these days probably my answer has changed to what it would be in the past. I think in a way one thing is my motivation and hunger for poker playing isn't what it used to be. So it's a challenge for me to kind of motivate myself to be getting out there, to be studying as well. So it's a challenge for me to just be studying as much as I should probably. So that's something that holds me back. Like my motivation there probably holds me back from being as good as I could be these days. Something else that holds me back, they're probably just still like certain mental leaks I have, I think. In a way, maybe there are spots that I'm trying to be too theoretically sound and not taking every exploit spot, for example. So we were just talking about there. If I have occasionally insecurities of what people might think sometimes, that's something that held me back before, where I didn't want to look like an idiot in some ways. That's held me back in the past as well for my poker strategy in general. Like, is why I would maybe default more to theoretically sound plays that I think could objectively be seen as good, rather than like trying to take every spot and worry about some rank like giving me some strange face for whatever I've done. So those are definitely a few things that have held me back more in the past. Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think the biggest challenge we have, if we think about the greatest opponent being ourselves, is indeed like that inner dialogue, right? I can definitely relate to what you're saying, that you almost default to kind of making the play that everyone agrees on is good. Because if you do something else, you basically say to everyone, well, you guys all suck. I know it better. So you need a certain level of confidence, right? Your mojo has to be on in order to really roll with that. You said that, probably also part of the reason why you like mixed games is that you like kind of the poker puzzle, right? You like to figure things out, try to discover how things work, how certain games work. You also enjoy the competitive aspect, beating people, like you said, especially beating people for money. When did you first discover that part of yourself, like that you were so competitive? Like, did the kids in did the kids in school learn that their lunch money was not safe if Benny was around?
God, yeah, I think that's probably very Trying to think. I was competitive in a lot of ways. Actually, God, that reminds me. I used to play even some chess when I was very young. I was probably like 10, 11. And then I basically was the best in my class at the time, and then just stopped playing because of that. There wasn't like another challenge or competition. So I just stopped. And like, I wasn't that good at it, but it was just, remember being competitive in that way. Like, it was just a small class. That was just something that I randomly remembered. The other thing was probably sports. I was most competitive in. I used to do a lot of sports, various teams at school, like throughout my school days from like 10 up until 18, for example. I was in like the badminton teams at my school and university, trying to compete a lot at those. And yeah, I think probably just games in general, board games, I would always take, I guess, somewhat seriously, or like just be competitive at, yeah, even probably Monopoly or whatever. Yeah.
Did you ever take that competition too far, maybe in a setting that wasn't really appropriate, like, you know, Monopoly, Monopoly with the family?
I would imagine I probably got into some arguments in the family with some kind of Monopoly type games. Yeah. Nothing stands out, but yeah, I could imagine like there was some tensions there.
What is it about competition? Like, what does it bring out in you?
I think there is the aspect of it, I guess, being against myself and potentially improving, like seeing improvement. I enjoy. I find that to be satisfying in general, just seeing how you're improving and progressing. And I think having some kind of competitive hunger is better for that in general. I mean, I guess I just also enjoy that aspect of winning, frankly. I think that's probably just been quite natural to me. It wasn't necessarily something that I just like seek to do, but I think it's always just been quite natural to me. So something else. I'm sure there's probably more to it than that. I can't really think right now. But yeah, maybe the kind of just friendly thing as well, of like kind of victory against friends or something as well. Yeah.
I think most people can relate to that one. Like when I was younger, any game, if you can beat your friends, it's nice to rub it in. You know, it's some friendly banter, right? Yeah, definitely makes games more enjoyable. You mentioned already you play chess, competitive in badminton. When did poker first come on your radar?
So poker first was when I was about 14, 15. When I saw my dad playing some online money, and then I was interested in like play money from there, and started on that, trying to figure out strategies and actually kind of trying to figure out strategies that I think could be I was going to say profitable, but like just useful, more advanced things, just trying to work things out myself. That I found that to be more there, like my dad is sort of just kind of content playing whatever, kind of just like clicking buttons without too much thought, I guess. And yeah, I was more intrigued by that whole kind of cerebral aspect of it.
Do you recall any like first strategic breakthroughs for yourself, where you're like, hey, this is starting to look like something?
I think there was probably one in particular. I was like trying to work out advanced bluffs, and I remembered when I'd sort of like found the check raise, like, wow, this is a thing. And like, or even like check call flop to check raise turn. I was like, wow, this is kind of the next level, more advanced kind of bluffs. and this is again when I'm like 15, I've never spoken to anybody else about poker. This is just like me thinking about things to myself that I was just like, or like even like a flop float to check to raise a turn somehow. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of really getting in there. So I think that was probably the first sort of thing I remember in my mind that I was getting excited about. This is something I'm actually like figuring out.
Yeah, like obviously, you know, when you have when you're not in the poker world, right? You haven't consumed anything. Many ideas that you have, you know, might be based on nothing. But on the other side, your mind is still very open, right? You're not yet programmed, because I feel like a lot of the learning that sometimes you have to do is unlearn some bad habit that you had. So like the benefits in the beginning is that you're still so open-minded. Actually, you mentioned the float. I recall actually very, very, very early, I was not pro yet. I had the same. It's like, if there's an ace high board and I call, people think I have an ace. So I would just start floating ace high boards, because when I call, they have an ace and they give up, and then I can bluff later on. It's pretty advanced concept, right? If we think about floating already when you were 15, I was not 15, but like very early, maybe I was 20 or something, you know? And later I would just call. I remember if I would call a low board, I would call. Then people would put me on a set because I called twice. And then I could wrap a set later on. This was probably 1 or 2 years later. But yeah, it is fun how having unprogrammed mind, right, based on common things that people think about program, and like the kind of creative ideas that you can come up with. Do you still label yourself as like a creative mind? Do you try to preserve your creativity in some sort of way?
In a way, I would like to think so. I was remembering other like nonsense things, even when like I had started like the earliest days of like real money when I was 18, and it'll just be things like, you know, if someone opens or like 3 bets, whatever, you know, you have aces, just literally go all in, like just go all in for 100 plus. And I was like, this is genius, you know. Every time they 3-bet, and then, you know, they would never fold queens or whatever, and it'll just like happen all the time. And I remember these kind of things, just thinking about that, where I was thinking at the time, like I was feeling creative about these things, and just working out these kind of strategies. These days, I think mostly no limit. Sadly, well, probably sadly, I generally default to more kind of theoretical game, where there's not so much room for creativity. I guess you can get into like the no blocking streets or whatever if you'd like. But in a way that sort of made me sad that it was more about memorization for things more these days than just really kind of creativity and really just using your brain as much as you can versus your opponent's brain, and not hoping they've seen whatever charts that they've remembered as well. So for No Limit especially, I don't think I am / have been very creative in the last years. Mixed games, I think I still try to be creative. I think there's still like some cool maneuverable spots and things like that, especially in tournaments that I've thought a lot about, and I think I do still have edges there in certain ways. But I think maybe generally these days I would have my creative outlets maybe in somewhere outside of poker, like music or something.
Is that because like the other games compared to No Limit Hold'em are less solved, and therefore there's more brain solving, right? More the brain versus brain aspect comes out more?
Yeah, I think so. That's sort of the main thing. That I think there's more room for exploits generally, and more also kind of maneuverability in certain ways as well. And, you know, things like there's sort of cool things you can do with shorter stack depths as well that lots of people haven't necessarily thought about too much as well. But yeah, the people who are just brain solving there, I'd like to think I have decent edge in certain ways where I have or seen solves. Yeah.
Your main expertise nowadays is indeed like mixed games. What game did you start out poker with, and how did that evolve into a passion for the entire mixed game selection?
I started with Hold'em, both limit and no limit. So from 15 or so, that was all I had seen. And then, by the way, I sort of took a break when I was like 16 and 17 after this. So it wasn't until I was like 18 or so when I was sort of back in playing a pub game or something, or playing with my housemates and things like that. It's where I started playing again. And then the next game I found from there was PL08 back when I was online, probably 19, I think. That was one game that I found really interesting. Yeah, I thought that had a lot of room for kind of maneuverability and creativity in certain ways too. I think that's just in general a pretty cool poker game.
Did you mentioned, you're playing with friends, pub, 18, 19. When did you decide to go pro?
Mm-hmm. So it was probably, I was about 23-ish when I was full-time pro, maybe 22. But I was sort of, I guess, part-time pro, I guess around 21, 22. Yeah. So it's quite a slow.
Were there any moments like after you decided, okay, I'm gonna play this for a living? I guess you were playing PLO8 then as well. That's what the game that you decided on playing for a living in the beginning.
No, so that was the first mixed game that I'd found, and then sort of the next couple of years I'd found some more. So I think I was 19, 20 when I had found Full Tilt, and then kind of opened the scope of all of the mixed games and everything there. So it was kind of 8 game there. That was the big thing at that time. So I was interested in those. And then, yeah, I think 22, mostly part-time in kind of like heads up, sit and goes, things like that. So I was playing like Limit Hold'em, heads up, 08, heads up, 8 game, heads up, those kind of things.
So you started playing heads up, sit and goes when you were playing for a living. Were there any moments when you questioned the decision of doing this for a living?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I was still part-time, I'd sort of still like left scope for myself to be doing other things. I wasn't really all in on it, but it was a lot of my time. And yeah, I remember times in the heads up grind, but it was kind of really rough. I definitely had some like miserable times. Like the variance there is just crazy. And heads up is a tough game, man. Like, you can't hide in the heads up. And definitely kind of made me question my ability a lot in some aspects where, I'd had rough patches, losing streaks, where sort of makes me self-doubt and question myself, like, am I as good as I think is going to be profitable in this game? Am I still beating X person? Sort of trying to examine that, and that was tough for me, that kind of self-reflection and doubt. So yeah, that was a tough period, I guess, before I kind of transition to other things too.
What does this time of struggle teach you that you think set you up for a long and successful poker career?
Yeah, I think it taught me to actually focus on your leaks in a way. Heads up is just a game where it becomes clearer what your leaks are in a way. So rather than sort of hiding from your leaks or just sort of pretending or hoping something doesn't exist, you're kind of going to be battered by repetition in those from the number of hands you're playing. So obviously, heads up, you're just playing so many more hands, you're put into more difficult spots, and it benefits your game more to focus on those leaks, to have those become better, rather than just kind of focus on things you think you might be good at and just like make your strengths a tiny bit better, rather than like really trying to bring the worst parts of your game up and really trying to focus on those. And I really try to be realistic in those times about my ability and where I'm kind of strong or where I might not be. So like the self-awareness there, I think that taught me was really important. Trying to be as self-aware as I can and trying to examine where I think I might not be good, or, you know, even for example, in the heads up hierarchy, as it were, that you sort of might know your place. If like you can beat all these people, but you can't beat this person, then it's sort of important to not be deluded in your ability, thinking you can beat this person and just play them when you're losing money, obviously. So that's also just an important thing, to kind of have your confidence in check in a way, and potentially keep your ego out of it. So yeah, I think trying to be realistic about my skill, trying to kind of not be deluded about things like that, and be rational about things and critically examine, those are all important things I learned.
In the beginning, you were grinding mainly online, but when APT came to town, I saw on your Handem up, you started to dip your toes in those as well, with some cashes, I think, in the London EPTs. I saw then in 2015 you got your first WSOP bracelet in the Deuce to 7 triple draw. Nowadays you seem to prefer live more than online. Why is that, and how was the transition from online to live for you?
Yeah, so firstly, the transition, I think was tough for me in some ways. I think particularly mixed games, like I had taken a break from live games in a way, since the kind of pub days. So, you know, when I was playing back in the pub leagues, and it's all sort of fun, and like the atmosphere is obviously very different to anything in like real competitive, you know, it's self-dealt, like these kind of things. It's very different. And then it was probably years later, I don't know when, maybe 23 or 24 or so, when I really got back into live properly. And then, yeah, that was quite a shift. Just both basic things like counting pot size, you know, these kind of things that you just have to get used to, obviously. That I definitely felt like a bit of a fish at those times. Even if I'm, you know, I've been successful online, I'm still like taking some getting used to online. And taking some getting used to live. And then these days, yeah, online doesn't appeal to me as much as it used to, sadly. I do prefer the social aspect of it these days. And I find online generally to be a kind of a more insular experience and less fulfilling in that way too. I did used to enjoy it more, but it sadly doesn't appeal to me as much as it used to, unless sort of the special series I'd care more about, but generally the random tournaments, not so much, as well as like it's just clearly gotten tougher in like every way. And I think live games generally are still thriving in most aspects. So generally from an EV point of view, in terms of stakes of buy-ins as well and skill there, then I think they're generally better spots.
The first bracelet you won, 2015, Deuce 7 triple draw. Did that confirm your preference towards life? You're like, oh, I can imagine that, like with the TV, you hold up the bracelet, the money on the table. It's the whole experience, right? Compared to online. Did that really make you addicted to the live rush?
Yeah, it did. That was quite a kind of breakthrough thing for me, I think. It was both, obviously it's the bankroll boost that I felt like very good about. And it was really like the confidence that I got from it as well. I think that whole year, that obviously it's like one tournament, doesn't really mean much, but it just felt in my mind like it was quite cementing to me to be sort of like, this is, my full-time job now, basically. It's like, no, okay, I'm more legitimacy in that way. So, I had held World Series in high esteem and like prestige, and it just like felt like, okay, this is legitimate in terms of like sort of arriving and like belonging here in that way. So yeah, that absolutely felt to me like it was kind of a substantial time. And live, obviously publicity, as you say, it's a real attraction, and it feels a lot more just like legitimate in terms of real world aspects than online. Yeah.
You mentioned the big bankroll boost. How, like in general, I think you mentioned that you're a creative player. We talked about confidence in general, a big struggle, and things, for example, that I've seen coaching people. The biggest bottlenecks always like finances, pressure. How did poker or your experience as playing poker professionally feel different after you had this bankroll boost? Did that relieve like some stress? Were you able to enjoy the grind more?
I guess it relieved stress in the way that I now felt more comfortable. And the ability to just move up in stakes. Like I was playing quite low stakes online at the time relative to that. Like really, I was still probably playing like 4-8 limits. And those are like relatively low stakes. They're like pretty tough stakes to make a living at, frankly. So to win my bracelet at that time was big. Like I was able to move up in stakes. That was really nice. And sorry, what was the other part of your question?
No, like if it kind of then set you free. You mentioned that in the beginning, you're still, I guess you were to a certain degree dependent on how poker was doing to finance your life. But kind of now that it sounded like that score set you free from that, so you could just purely focus on, I don't know, enjoying the game, the competitive aspect. You didn't have to worry about the money anymore.
I guess I would say didn't worry about the money anymore. I still did. Like it wasn't like it was $1 million score or something, relatively speaking, but it did make my life better too at that time in terms of like actual real world money. It was still meaningful to me when I was, basically living with my parents at the time. It was meaningful to me then. Also, I think it did feel like it was nice for even like my parents to see that legitimacy. Like, okay, he can have this as his profession and his job. Like this, like both, like he has the potential to make money and like he's probably actually good at it and he can like beat, other world-class players in Vegas, like these kind of things. So I think that was nice in a way, probably relieved a bit of pressure there too, as well, that they just felt more comfortable with that situation as well, I think.
Yeah, I remember showing my parents, I think one of the first interviews that I did, I went to a live stop in the Netherlands. I was just known as an online kid, right? But in the Netherlands, they didn't know who I was, so they dragged me in front of the camera. That's when the first time I could show to my parents, like, look, they interviewed me. And like, oh, they interviewed you. Oh, they must be a big thing, right? It's kind of the similar where you're on TV and you can say, look, I'm on TV, and then your parents think, well, then I guess you made it, right? That's kind of the definition. Adam, like we already touched on it a little bit. The pressure of, for example, the need to prove yourself or to kind of validate that poker was a good decision. Same with the money pressure. How do these kind of outside factors influence someone's ability to play poker and to enjoy poker? And how do you think those two go hand in hand?
Yeah, I think they play a huge role. If you look at most poker players getting into it, we're quite young generally, early 20s, maybe mid 20s on average, and you want to prove to yourself you can make money. So the first thing is, I can do this. But you've also got everyone around you who thinks you've lost your mind. Your family are like, when are you going to get a real job? Most of us have graduated uni or something, then we go, throw that away. So you feel it. You feel the external pressure from people around you. Even if it's not like every day or month to month, you feel that people don't really know what I'm doing and I need to validate that. So yeah, I feel like it definitely puts a lot of performance pressure on you. Some families or environments will be more kind of toxic in terms of the pressure they feel. Me personally, I just felt like I had to prove to myself I could make it work. And then I had to show over time to my peer group and my family that I wasn't losing my mind and I could, hey, look, I've got this. Don't worry about me. I'm on the right path. So yeah, I feel like in terms of performance, it has a big impact because if you're trying to perform, but you're worried about making money to pay the bills, it's just a lot of pressure. It makes you very attached to results. It makes swings feel very personal and, oh my God, what I'm losing. Even if you think you can handle the swings, if you feel like your family can't deal with it, you're just going to have to keep that secret from them, keep it secret from the people around you. I know many poker players who don't tell their partners what they win and losing because their partners can't deal with them losing and winning lots of money. So yeah, I feel like there's a lot that goes into it. Hopefully most players get the point over time where they can create a bit of stability. They can potentially show people around them over time that they're committed, they're dedicated to it. I felt like for me personally, the biggest thing wasn't showing results. It was showing attitude and dedication to what I did. And I tried to show some results. I tried to show graphs, tried to show my supernova late rake back, which was guaranteed. None of that really worked. But over time, they're like, oh, Adam, you seem like you're really committed to this poker thing. It feels like you've got to cover over time. Obviously, this was a 4 to 5 year thing to get respect there. But yeah, I feel like also over time, you generally realize it doesn't really matter. Your parents will not understand. Your peer groups, some of them will kind of get poker, but not really. And then doing it for your own reasons. So like kind of graduating through that kind of trying to prove to other people, and then hopefully getting to a point where you feel comfortable in yourself and then everyone else gets on with their own life, their own problems, and they leave you to it. Especially for you, Benny, I'm sure you've been playing poker long enough. You get left alone now and there's no external pressures there. So yeah, I would love to jump into a bit of more of a modern day part of your story in terms of 2024. I know you went on a big downswing and it was a challenging experience in terms of losing a big part of your role. I want to know how you generally deal with downswings. Obviously, as a poker player, especially playing tournaments, one of the challenges dealing with variance. So you personally, how have you dealt with that in 2024 in particular? How do you deal with that period for yourself?
Yeah, so I think in the past there's probably been two different ways that I've approached it. And sometimes it's been more effective than others, but that's probably largely results orientated. I think the two mindsets I had was like, I want to just like grind through it. I just want to kind of keep going and try and either build confidence back up or, build some money up in a way. And still feel like I'm on the right track. The other was just take time off. Obviously, like quite opposing paths. So I think it depends how and depends when as well. So I think like at that time, I probably could have used some time off, frankly. I think that might have been a better path for me at that time. But live stops are a thing, like that schedule still happens. So then, for example, there was the Irish Open at that time, and that was kind of near the end of my downswing, where if it was later on, I would prefer that. I would have gone then instead. I would have just maybe taken time off. But like, I felt the kind of obligation and necessity to go there, even though I wasn't necessarily in the greatest headspace, probably. But I thought, good tournaments there, friends there, that as well. So that was also kind of an important thing for me, sort of having the hopeful social fun aspect of it. That would hopefully kind of put me in a better headspace. Unfortunately, it didn't work out that time, but again, that's sort of results oriented, and a sample of like 10, 15 tournaments, it's like quite meaningless. But I think if I would have had the space to take time off, then it probably would have been better for me. So the main way I would look to deal with downswings is just have better things going on in my life, really, as well. I think that's very important for me personally. I think when there are other skills or other like aspects that are going well for me that I can look at and sort of be happy with, I think that's an important thing for me, and not have poker be the main focus. Because if poker is sort of your whole life and that's not going well, it can feel really, really tough and very kind of absorbing in a tough way. So I look to try to have more balance in those times, be like, oh, my health is okay if I'm like back in the gym at that time. If you're, let's say hitting a PB or something. So other ways that you might be able to get some feeling of satisfaction and achievement that sometimes poker grants you. Other things there, or like, oh, I'm enjoying playing guitar, I'm good at that, whatever it is. You can have other aspects as well as social environments, just to both have fun and maybe take your mind off poker as well. And then also the other way is just probably study as well, trying to get kind of confidence back through that way as well, where you're kind of both trying to fix your weaknesses and being like, okay, I'm getting these things right. I am still on the right track. Getting kind of the confirmation to get your confidence back up and sort of like, yeah, okay, I'm doing these things right. And having the knowledge and confidence that, in the long term, you're going to be winning. It's going to, happen for you in good ways, hopefully. So I think all of those are different aspects that I would like to go.
Yeah, I think you covered all the potential paths you can take to deal with the downswing. The first was like playing through it, like volume your way through it, almost overcome variance by playing. As you mentioned, occasional live stops, that's the only play because there's no times to breaks. Then you mentioned like the kind of taking breaks from the game overall and getting your life in order, or at least like feeling that you're not just a poker player. I know for me, the worst downswings were my early days living in Thailand with friends, and all I did was play poker, study, live, breathe it. And a downswing has felt like my heart had been ripped out, and it was so painful because nothing else was going on in my life to kind of balance it. So yeah, I think having other things going on allows you to realize, poker's going bad, but this is going well. And I think the other avenue is regaining confidence through studying. That would always be my default, to try to gain confidence by studying more, at least increasing the ratio, your kind of playing to study ratio. Yeah. During downswings, it's often very hard to keep that confidence high when results are slapping you in the face. So yeah, I think it's good to know like what works for you. And you mentioned for you, time off works well, taking a break. Other players might be going harder in the lab. But yeah, trying to find that balance. There's no like right or wrong, no sweet spot that works for everyone, but trying to find that optimal balance. I feel like probably the worst is when you play through in a bad mindset and hope results will turn around. I know I work with many players who this is their go-to, and it's like, I keep playing. It's like, yeah, you're playing dog shit and you keep losing and it's not going to turn around. You need to take a bit of time off. So yeah, I feel there's The other one's taking a bit of a break, at least by default.
Yeah.
You can reevaluate, you can clear your heads, you can improve your game. Whereas just the blindly going through, which I'm a stubborn guy, so I can relate to the mindset, but you better watch the warning signs when you take that too far.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I think the problem there as well is that people then see like, okay, I'm in a downswing. They put it in the variance calculator, right? They put their win rate that they've observed. They say, okay, I have to grind this out, so I have to just play 200k hands and then I'll be out of it. Not realizing that their current win rate is no longer their actual win rate, so the downswing will only last more. And it's really... usually when you ask them, like, what are you trying to do? Well, I'm trying to get out of it. Okay, so you think now playing more in a compromised state is going to get you out of it? Usually the intention is good, but there's a flaw, right, that you have to kind of correct.
Yeah, I was actually going to say the same thing. I remember during that time when I felt like obligated to play, and I didn't particularly want to actively be playing because of the kind of that mindset. That I think I wasn't playing my A game. I think it was likely that, you know, my ROI was lower in general. So both variance is higher essentially when your ROI is lower and you're battling there, but also just that the win rate was lower and I wasn't playing as well. It's gonna have worse results than otherwise. And I think I noticed that at that time. I think that was quite a serious thing that I was like, okay, I'm gonna take a pause.
Okay. You've played a ridiculous amount of scoops and WCOOPs. I think 2023 was your best year when you had a record of 7 wins. What makes you suited to the kind of series grind? And we'll go into, for you personally, how you approach these. And yeah, what personally for you, what you find was a good fit for you?
Yeah. Funnily enough, I don't think I am necessarily super suited for a series grind. Actually, was the main thing I was thinking about when you asked that. So yeah, that WCOOP and Scoop year, I was playing in Vancouver, and it's generally on a very early schedule for Vancouver, and it's earlier than I'd like. Like I'm not sort of a morning person. I'm not like strict doing that. So frankly, I'm not such a series grinder in that way. Like I really kind of have to force myself, and it's difficult for me. And I think I don't necessarily play the best that I can, like consistently in that environment when it's sort of more forced, and like try to be waking up like as early as I need to in that time, like because it's like a 8:30, 9 a.m. starts essentially, which for me is too early. I'd like to be able to take my time in the morning, kind of wake my brain up and that kind of stuff before I start a big grind. And honestly, it feels quite limiting to me in those environments as well. I do it in Vancouver generally because I like the aspect of being able to go outside after a series, go see sunlight. It's still light outside, and I can actually make use of that time being outside, and I can decompress after a series, after a day of the series, and, you know, still do some activity, hopefully exercise, something like that. But I still find it quite difficult, to be honest. Like each series day is pretty intense. There's a lot going on. Don't get more than a 4-minute break throughout the day for like 8+ hours. And in a way, I'd like to have a better answer for you and just be like, yeah, I crush it. And, you know, this is so easy for me. I do it in this way. But honestly, it's just a really hard thing, like objectively, to just be 8+ hours a day, multi-tabling everything with like no longer than 4 minutes break. And like after a day of that, it's like tough for me to kind of let go of those days in a way. You know, it'll normally take me a good, let's say, couple of hours after the day of grinding finishes before I'm kind of in a nicer, calmer headspace. And I would say I'm good at, you know, multi-tabling generally, but well, in some ways, I'm sure I could be better organized in certain things, like, let's say, getting my meal prep sorted, like all of these kind of things where I could make the most of my breaks. But that's still something that I have room to improve on as well. And I mean, obviously, with playing multiple games and playing everything, I think I have the ability to do well in kind of winning lots of things, lots of tournaments. But at the same time, it probably takes some ROI out of my game in certain aspects, which is also not a great thing when I'm playing 8-9 tables of all different games, including like a $11 Badugi 2208 at the same time as a tough 2K no limit, 1K no limit. Like, definitely my ROI is lower in the 1K no limit. It's where edge is already really tough in those, really small in those these days. They're very tough, honestly. 1K plus coops, very tough. So if I'm playing all these other games and all these other tables where my focus is, then realistically, I think my ROI is, down to maybe break even. And I think I do a good job of managing those overall, but realistically, it's still tough. And in terms of actually dollar value, that's potentially not the best thing. So in a way, I maybe do a good job of not having the dollar value best for each game, but like the overall wins as well is higher if I'm going for overall like leaderboard points or something like that.
So yeah, it sounds like these series are a mental challenge, like a very grueling affair, but it also feels like you have an ability to manage these better than most people. Let's just put it that way, because even though you're struggling, other players must be struggling twice as much. And yeah, I'm curious to know for you, when you're playing lots of different formats at the same time, I'm just trying to relate to that experience. It must be very challenging with different strategies for different game types, different buy-ins. How do you maybe simplify your decision making to allow yourself to play so many different formats simultaneously?
Yeah, as you said, it is a simplification where spots where there definitely is going to be exploits available or certain things that are going to be higher EV decisions if I was like really locked in on one or two tables. But realistically, if I'm tabling, you can't really do that, unfortunately. So I'd probably simplify just by playing a kind of a more basic theoretical strategy, sort of in a more autopiloting way there, which, as I said, likely reduces my ROI there. So I don't think it's a good thing, really.
Yeah, but it must be a effective baseline strategy. As you mentioned, it's like to optimize EV in this environment feels it's not going to work. So you've got to find a workaround to go, right, I need to make decisions for 8 hours in different formats. I need to find a way for my brain to actually do that. So yeah, obviously it's probably frustrating for you as a competitive guy to play below the standard you could play on a low amount of tables, but does feel like also survival of the fittest and trying to come up with a strategy for that.
Yeah, and I do try to like really prioritize the series. Like during that series, I'm like, this is the thing I'm focusing on for these 3.5 weeks. The rest of my life is essentially going to go on the back burner. So like, this is going to be my focus, which, I'm still doing other things because that's part of the series. For me, is important to have the balance. It is helpful for me to have the ability to go see friends after a day of grinding, go, do the outside sport, whatever it is, decompress in the gym, something like that. I see that as, in a way, kind of part of the grind, or even like a morning preparation or something. Like, it's catered to grinding is pretty much going to be my focus for that time. But I don't necessarily think it's a great thing for, like, let's say, happiness EV during that time. It's a really tough, grueling thing. And yeah, like, that is the focus. Gonna try to get back to other life after. Yeah.
Yeah, you're making a big sacrifice, a lot of trade-offs to optimize for poker during that. And if it doesn't help with the grind, it probably gets put on the back burner.
Yeah.
If it feels like it complements it,
Maybe.
it sounds like for you personally, you'd keep it in there. So imagine someone listening who is getting ready to play a scooped grind, and they want to optimize their performance during it. What would be your top 3 tips to increase their results or just survive a series like that?
Okay. I guess first thing would be the assumption that they won't move time zone, I guess, for that. So let's say assuming that they're going to play it from wherever they normally play online. So for me, again, my main consideration, like this series, for example, I basically just decided I was going back to Vancouver, even though it's on too early of a time zone for me. I would prefer somewhere a bit more east of there, so I was debating that. I go there also just because I like the whole environment, basically, kind of the atmosphere, and I sort of curate it in a way of like I'm planning to be focusing on this series during that time, but also I'm like, okay, I know the things that I'm going to do in the evenings roughly. I could go to this gym, I can go to whatever class, yoga class, something like this, that's going to be nice for me in the evenings. So I think one thing is just have that environment clearly set up in a way, assuming that they're going to play it from their house. That's kind of what I was thinking about. You probably know things that are around your house that you can do. But think about how it might complement the grind or not, and how you best operate for those kind of things. Like before and after the grind, is it nice for you to work out beforehand, after it? How do you decompress after the grind, before sleep? So your schedules for this is very important, obviously. Like sleep schedules is of course a big thing. So it's hard to give like clear advice on that for if someone is living in X place and they have this certain schedules. But thinking about all those things, the way you can optimize that would probably be the main thing. Other ways, I guess, it sort of depends, if you're a full-time player or part-time, or recreational, if you're looking at these. So you can maybe plan how your series is going to look. You can look at the schedule, think what the events that I want to play, are there events that I'm going to prioritize? How much am I going to play each day? Am I going to take any days off? Things like that. So just to sort of plan and envision how your weeks are going to go. Then things like trying to make the most of the 5-minute breaks, try and get, meals sorted if you can, is a huge thing. How else are you going to use them? Maybe are you going to have little 4-minute meditations packed in, something like this, something that you're going to be able to hopefully set you up better for each next hour after that 5-minute break, basically. So these are, I think, quite important, that hopefully each person knows how they work best in those environments. So they can think, oh, those 4 minutes, I'm going to run hands that I had from that last hour. And then they will not be on my mind for the rest of the day. Something like this. If it's hard for you to kind of let go of the last hour, that might help. Or if you just want to take your mind off poker, go see the sunlight for 4 minutes, and then set yourself up for the next hour, that's, perfectly great. So obviously it works differently for each person. Then there's like, are you going to study before the series? Are you going to prepare how you're going to work for the series? Again, can be for each person. Some people might just want to take their brain off poker for the series because that's what they're going to do for those 3.5 weeks and focus only on the playing. Others might like to study and then feel like really ready to go because they're feeling like really switched on. So in that way of anticipating how you're going to be for the series as well, I think is very important in terms of both ability and confidence and execution and all these things, because you're going to need to be executing when you're on day 7 and hour 7 of the day, and you're going to be tired and trying to not autopilot in whatever thing. So you have to kind of be prepared to struggle in a way, like be prepared to be tired and having a tough time. So if you have the study to back it up, then you will do better at executing in those tough times, right? It's important. And hopefully as well, also in the tough times where it's like late in the day and you're playing for more money, the final tables, like these kind of things where it's more important, obviously, to be playing well. Hopefully that you will still be executing well. If there's some kind of ways that help you relax for, let's say, a final table where you're able to feel confident, then that's very important. Like knowing where all the money is up top on final tables, this is going to probably define your series in a lot of cases. So those are the main things, as well as even like the preparations before each day that you might want to do. Are you going to want to sleep until this time? Are you going to want to go outside and see some fresh air, see some friends, get exercise? Are you going to want to prepare, meditate before a session? So just focus on how you think you will do best. It's a bit hard for me to say because people are so different in those aspects. So hopefully you know how you optimally work in those kind of environments. So
yeah, well, that was a masterclass in what to consider to prepare yourself for a series. And what was evident there is how much planning, preparation, intentionality goes into everything, from environment to routine to your evening wind down to when to take breaks, what to do on your breaks, when to eat, what schedule I'm grinding. Do I need days off? Do I need to grind study before or not? So as you mentioned, very personal, but I think the questions you went through and the kind of the main things you put forward there, each player needs to address them for themselves and go, right, for me, how do I make sure everything is set up for me and my environments to make sure I perform the best? One thing I wanted to ask for you is, how do you approach days off? I know there's like kind of mixed views on these, and I hear players, some just want to grind almost every day. Some have the philosophy of, I'll take a set day off when the schedule's not as busy. And others have like, I'll take a day off as I need it kind of approach. So for you personally, you've done many series. What is your approach to off days?
Yeah, so thankfully for Scoop and WCOOP, they have the dedicated day off on Friday. I absolutely always take that day off. I think it would be borderline insanity not to, really. Like I can't be grinding it literally every day. I need that kind of reset. If there was 2 days off a week, I would probably be happy. And then the question is how I take that day off. And honestly, I mostly try to listen to my body and how I'm feeling. So I would often have ideas of how I would take that day off. Like, okay, if I'm feeling up for going to the gym, great. If I'm not, okay, I'll give myself a rest day. I'll allow myself to kind of be tired if I want to. So if I'm feeling like that, then I think it's probably more important and valuable for me to actually like take care of myself and how I'm feeling. And allowing myself the space to kind of be however I'm feeling. Like, am I wanting to have energy to go outdoors? Great. Even if I want to like study for an hour and run hands that I've had from the series so far, that's great. If I'm not, then okay, I'll just give myself a break. Normally, I am generally like trying to see friends that I normally haven't seen the rest of the series so much. Same with like trying to see some nature, I think is a really nice reset for me in general. I think that's quite important for my headspace and kind of peace of mind where you are mostly kind of locked in doors for a whole series. I think it's nice to go outside, even like go for a hike in Vancouver if I have the energy, something like that, to then kind of reset my brain to like, okay, next day we're locked in for another week. We're gonna have to be put through this thing. So whatever I think is gonna set my mind and body best for the following weeks is best, as well as how I think I will have kind of gotten over the past week of insanity best. Like, is it going to be study best? Is it going to be just do nothing best? Sometimes I do something like a float tank even, where I just literally turn your brain off for an hour. Like something like that I think is quite nice as a relaxing way.
Yeah, so it sounds like you spend that day really checking in with yourself and figuring out what do you need most now for recovery to set yourself up for those next 6 days. So it feels like you've got a lot of different tools you can use based on how you're feeling, whether it's going to study, get outdoors, or even flow. But yeah, I really like that flexibility. I think it takes a bit of self-awareness to understand yourself well enough to go, what do I need right now? Not push yourself too hard, just really trying to check in, listen to the body, and figure out what's going to be that optimal balance for recovery. So I just want to touch on one thing you mentioned earlier, how late in sessions, final tables, for example, that's often where all the money's made. Yet often that's where focus is the most strained. You've been playing long sessions, multiple days in a row, and it's great if we can just go, right, focus, let's turn it up to a 10, let's go, final table. But a lot of players will be feeling fatigued. They might struggle with the long grinding sessions. For you, how do you make sure that, what do you do personally to make sure your focus is where you want it to be for final tables late in the grinds?
And it touches a bit in with this. I was also going to add for the last point as well that I think age is actually a factor too, where I think I've changed a bit the older I've got. Like, sadly, I don't think I can just go quite as hard as I could 10 years ago with like literally just playing every day. I think I do need to be listening to my body more these days and knowing how I work better to just not like kind of burn myself out into the ground. Sadly, it's just having to accept that situation where age is a thing and I don't have the energy in that way that I used to, with just being able to have the ability to go 8+ hours every day and still like have the energy to just like bang the next day. And yeah, in terms of energy for like the final tables, in a way, is partly why I seek that kind of time zone as well, where I'm kind of fortunate where if I'm playing a final table and it's 4 or 5 p.m. for me, rather than like 1 or 2 a.m. where in Europe, for example. So I think that's important, and it's where like hopefully I still have some energy left in that time of the grind because of where it lies in my day. In general, honestly, the main thing is just practice. It's sort of hard in a way to kind of teach it, I think. I'm curious if you'll agree there, actually, but I think just experience is very important, where, you know, if you've been there before, it is just easier in a lot of ways. You understand things that are going to be happening, both with like a table dynamic and strategy, and will be happening to how you will be feeling as well. So in that way, I'm sort of curious if you think you're able to kind of teach people that if they are there for the first time.
Yes, I think, as you mentioned, experience plays a massive role, both in terms of strategy, being able to feel confident in your strategy, and also getting the reps in, like the reps of long sessions. Focus like a muscle. If you're focusing for long periods often, you get fatigued, focally fatigued, you're still able to perform at a high level. In terms of teachability, I think, let's say someone struggles with this, they haven't got the reps in, they're slightly inexperienced, and they get into a final table. I think for them, it's understanding how to regain focus. So rather than like expecting to be in an optimal state the whole session, they need to spot when their mind's wondered, give their mind anchor points, and really almost like put extra effort in to staying focused. Also understanding their kind of arousal or activation. Some players, you can put them in a final table environment and they kind of switch on. Things are just like ready to go. Other players almost get overwhelmed. Like things too much is happening, almost like jittery because the pressure gets them, especially if they're quite inexperienced. So you've got to understand your own temperaments, what's going on internally, and how to channel that into performance. So yeah, obviously with experience, these things become quite standardized, almost like non-verbal. So, oh yeah, put me in a high environment, I can just put the reps in, like your body just takes over, so to speak. But when you're more inexperienced, you need to, yes, be more mindful of what your tendencies are and how to redirect your focus and calm yourself down if you need to when you're going into it. But yeah, I think experience is, in anything, we look at how we learn, we can get information, but real understanding can only come from experience. So to actually be able to perform under pressure, you have to get reps in, perform under pressure consistently to master that. So yeah, I think there's no shortcut, but there's things you can work on to bridge that gap, I think.
I agree, yeah. I was thinking about it because I didn't feel like it's necessarily the best advice to someone, especially if they're a newcomer player, to final tables is make more final tables. That's how you get better at final tables. You know, it's not necessarily the greatest advice. But I was also thinking then about certain things that have potentially helped me over the years that I've noticed. So overwhelm is like an important thing for sure as well, where both like expectations in my mind can actually kind of hinder my performance just because of overwhelm and how I'm picturing something. And final tables are obviously incredibly dynamic things. They can, change the whole dynamic in one hand. You can be chip leader and go to 7th of 8 left. You have to be able to just kind of recalibrate immediately without resting on the change, the disappointment, how that's gone. You have to be able to kind of maneuver each change as best you can and recalibrate and now move forward with how it's best to maneuver from that point of view. And also the overwhelm in a way of even like certain things that I used to do that I think made it something tougher for me. Like I would maybe post on social media that I made a final table because, I want to be like, this is a cool thing. Like support is nice, this kind of thing. But I realized that even things surrounding that probably adds things to me and to my brain that it probably hinders me in a way. Especially like I might get messages coming in about it and it's like a distraction, just more extra things on my brain that sort of take me out of the moment. And it's difficult for me to probably focus and just focus on my strategy as much as I can when there's these kind of things. So I started doing that less, and I think that's helpful. So it's kind of limiting external things like that might take focus away from you and might lead to overwhelm and might just be a detriment to your game. So finding ways that you're going to be most comfortable, most relaxed and focused. Yeah, best.
For you, was most of that overwhelmed feeling coming from external pressures, external inputs, so to speak, in terms of noise outside the system? Or was there also an internal overwhelm? Because sometimes we can create our own narrative, our own pressure. We can get overwhelmed because we're overthinking about the payoff structure. This guy's really good. And it can be completely internal state. So for you, how did you describe that?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a good question. And it's something I've definitely thought about a lot in the past. It's both, I think, for me in general. I think often my own expectations of things might make things worse for me, especially if it doesn't go to plan. So if it's, well, I was going to say loss, but it's like I've come second or third in a tournament, but I still might be very disappointed in the scenario. You know, let's say as first with half the chips remaining, with 4 left or whatever, and then you kind of build up that expectation in your mind. That is unhelpful to me in the past. Like I've realized that, as well as like I would even build a possible expectation or just have something in my mind of like imagining when I'm posting it to the world and I'm getting all the like praise and support and all that kind of things that I'm envisioning to be so nice, and like I'm hoping to be the case of whatever, like winning another title and how nice that's going to be. Like having that in my mind, I know I used to have, and probably that expectation makes things more costly for me when it doesn't go to plan, and can probably also just take some focus away from it too when I'm just have that narrative. As you said, like the word narrative there, I think is quite spot on for me when I just think about things related to that, as well as like narratives when I'm thinking like, oh, this replay is going to be broadcast. What are people going to think when they see a play with cards up? And that is like a narrative I still have, unfortunately, that I think is probably unhelpful to me in general. So narratives like those, I kind of try to get rid of, just the sort of extra voices and noise from, in a way it's myself, but it's like I'm putting it onto other people in a way. Like I'm putting other people's potential thoughts on them that's happening in my head. So just like those kind of imaginations that I've had in the past, I think hindering me, and as well as like myself when it's more, if it doesn't go to plan, it's more than just like you haven't won the tournaments. It's not just like you've come second in a tournament. It's like it's a loss of all these other things essentially that I have envisioned and expected, and that is both worse afterwards and I think during play as well for me. So I've learned to get better at that. I think I probably still have a bit of a way to go. But I think thinking about all these things, even like beforehand, and trying to be at peace with them more, is going to have you being more at peace during the game, essentially, and not have those extra narratives and voices in your head affecting your strategy. So if you really think very deeply, actually, with what you think you are seeking in that way. So if you envision, oh, I'll get these whatever nice feelings from when my friend congratulates me on the win, to how can I put it? Try to have those feelings first, either way, and not think of those as being contingent on a tournament. Then it's going to be a lot more peaceful experience for you, so that you're not then seeking, it's not that when you're playing and it's not a potential loss of that, then you're more comfortable during and after. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, I'm glad you shared that and went into so much depth there. And yeah, as you were speaking there, I was almost seeing like the expectations being your inner pressure that you're building on yourself. in expectations as a tournament player is always tricky because you guys play long grinds, you get to the final table, the payout structure starts going up and up and up, and it's hard not to create a story around that. And if you're not careful, expectations start rising and rising. And the expectation is always the story narrative that is setting you up for a fall. Because if you match that, you win. It's like, yeah, I got the high that I wanted, but anything below that feels like a loss. So you're creating this kind of almost like moment where you're going to drop from it most of the time. Obviously, if you win, your expectations get satisfied. Yeah. But most times you're realizing you're not realizing, but you are setting yourself up for a fall. It's going to feel like a loss, even though you might not, you might get a big score. So I think with that is just watching it. As you mentioned, try to be very careful, not to get too attached to the result part of it, not to get too excited. It's almost like, I could win, that would feel amazing. Oh, could come last. It would also be good. So it's trying to balance it in real time. Because as soon as you get so excited, there will be a come down. So as soon as you allow the expectations to just run as a default, as a story, there will be a payoff in terms of a negative for that. And the second one was more the outward pressures, which were like the judgments, like worrying about what other people might think. This can be a good thing in terms of what they might think if I win, how good I am. But often it's on the negative side. How will they feel about me? What will they think about my player? Especially if you've got televised events or big ones again. So it's like trying to watch that narrative go on in your mind and bring it back to the moment. And it's hard because we live in a world where we want to do well and we want other people to think we're good and do well as well. So we live in this kind of dual world of trying to achieve goals and also get respect for that. But anytime those are becoming too dominant, very quickly pressures rise. And then all of a sudden, in the narratives, the mind's just trying to play poker. And now it's fixated on winning this tournament, doing good, posting their graphs. It's like, okay, I've lost sight of that. So I think we all battle this to some degree. Obviously, playing tournaments is the ultimate manifestation of this. But I think just watching it is a healthy thing.
Yeah, I was thinking like, it depends how in depth to get to it on a kind of therapeutic level, but it's something that like I've looked into and thought about quite a lot. But yeah, for example, as you said, like the expectations and judgments for what other people think. So if you're feeling very insecure during with that kind of judgment, if you're actually at peace with that potential judgment, then there's nothing to be afraid of in that way. Like there's nothing that's holding you back. So hypothetically, if you were to look into that for yourself and think, where is my fear there? What is the judgment? Like, what is the negatives that are going to happen? What is that going to say about myself? Or what is that going to make me think about myself for X person to judge this? If you're understanding that and accepting of that, and if you can feel at peace with that, then when you're playing, that's not going to be there, right? And it can happen in the same way with the flip side, with the happiness part of it as well. But I think that was also quite a big thing for me, is trying to be at peace more with all those kind of various potential negative emotions, whether it's going to be even about myself, something I'm criticizing myself. Like if I make a mistake, then trying to not be hard on myself, then I'm not having the fear of making a mistake as well, because then I would know, oh, this is going to be a negative thing. I don't want to have that negative emotion from that as well. And same with judgment of if someone else is going to be critical of me making a mistake. If you're envisioning X person watching a replay being like, what the hell is he doing? This is so bad. That like, whilst you're playing, if you have that in your mind going along, then that's just going to hold you back. If realistically you're somehow able to be at peace and accepting of people thinking you're terrible, then it's not going to hold you back during or after as well. You're not going to have the like turmoil going on of like, God, I played so terrible, all these other people are going to think, you know. So ideally, if you're able to have peace there, it's much more peaceful experience.
Yeah, I love that because that's super practical. I think one way to do it is to almost like envision the worst case scenario. So the worst mistake you can make, how bad it can go and how it would make you feel. And the question is, can I be okay with that? Can I handle that kind of worst case? And very often the first initial action is, no, I can't because it feels badly. But very quickly, you say it's just a feeling that you don't want to experience. So yeah, if you can experience losing, making big mistakes, having people judge you in ways that you don't particularly like for your own security, but be okay with it. All of a sudden, there's nothing to worry about. So yeah, I think there's two philosophies I like. One is I don't care, so I'm not bothered what they think. But also, like when it comes to other people, there's another frame of like nobody cares about you personally because they've got so much things going on themselves. And because we have a one-player experience mode of life, we feel like we're really important to everybody. So we feel like everyone's watching us, everyone's judging us, but they've also got their one-player view and they don't really have time to consider you. So everyone's going through their own lives, living their own problems, and we're not that important to anyone. Maybe there's 3 to 5 people who really care about what you're up to. Hopefully they're good friends. But generally most people they'll see a bit of you and move on. So once you realize I don't need to care too much because random people's views don't matter. And on the flip side, they don't even care. They're probably not even watching as much as I think. Okay, all of this is a narrative in my mind that is creating a stress or a pressure that isn't actually real. It feels real. So yeah, I think it's a lot to hopefully unpack for people listening, but there's a lot you can do to combat both of those, the expectations, the judgments, and even make mistakes, as you mentioned there.
Yeah, absolutely. So
Rene, for you,
good.
How do you deal with your own inner narratives? What are some of the more dominant ones that you've had to overcome?
Plenty actually. Because I was thinking when I heard you guys talking, and that especially throughout my career, and I feel like this is like the long-term fix, right? You have to become aware. I think that's literally what we started this podcast with, right? Awareness. You have to become aware of the narrative that's running in your head and start to observe it and start to change the perspective. So let's say you know that at certain points in your session, certain narratives often come up, right? And then what people try to do is they try to fight them in that moment. But in that moment, you have no chance. You're in a compromised state. You're not going to win. So I wrote down actually something about, this was how you approach a series, right? It was very deliberate. You also have to be deliberate with what's going to happen in your session. So what are common feelings that come up? What are common narratives that come up? And before you play your session, you should already think about, how will I, or what's a better narrative that when I spot this narrative, what's kind of the override, right? And then you start practicing that. Or in my case, I would always visualize that before I would go into sessions. Like, this situation will come up. I will start to feel like this. I will recognize the feeling. This will be the narrative or new perspective. And then you practice that every session over and over. But I always found visualization to be very powerful because then you can practice it before you go into the session. And then when you're in the session, you're like, hey, I've trained this. I know this. Hey, I spotted this. And you can replace it. And the same with the expectations. When you don't align the expectations and something like, I think Benny said, you're chip leading, you're already thinking about what you're going to do with the win, and then suddenly, bum, you're 8. It's like, what the fuck just happened? And your mind cannot catch up, right? Whereas if you went in with, listen, this can all happen, right? Let's say, for example, I'm a cash game player. So an expectation alignment that I would say is like, listen, in this session, honestly, anything can happen. I can lose 6 buy-ins in the first half hour. So when that would happen, I would be like, yeah, well, we knew that this could happen, right? So then you don't freak out. Whereas if you don't align expectation, you're like, wait, what the fuck's happening? I lost 6 buy-ins. Oh my God, can I still play poker? Blah, 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 blah. So it's one, understanding the narrative, and then the other one, preventing the narrative from happening by aligning the expectation. So yeah, I think there was a lot to unpack here. Anything you would like to add to that, Benny?
Yeah, absolutely. As you said, and I think also just like anticipating your potential concerns from that. Like, what does each thing really mean for you? Like, is 6 buy-ins just losing 6 buy-ins? Like, is that just the money? Or like, what is that going to mean for you? Like you said, oh no, I can't play poker. Like, obviously it's hyperbole, but for most people that there's like something in that. Like, there's probably like some kind of doubt, like shit, am I just playing terrible this session? Like, what's happening? Like, it's probably hard for some people to just like not have that narrative at all if they're not expecting it. So, or even like you might expect there's a possible worst scenario, but you hope it won't happen, obviously. But there's like still some holding back there, like whatever it is that you have as a potential narrative as a result to look into there. Like, does it mean that it's a fear of, oh, you actually can't play, really? Or is it a fear of, whatever's happening for you that day? So there's like all these things that can, be tough. So that self-awareness, as we said, is a tough thing to like really dive into. And as you said, like during a session, like you're really maybe drawing dead to like really properly get it sometimes, and you might have to do it afterwards or even like before in preparation. But yeah, understanding yourself and how you work in those ways, I think is pretty important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like you said, right? You can take that trigger and that feeling. You can go even further down the rabbit hole, and then you probably end up somewhere in your childhood. I don't know what you can discover there, which is great. A long term definitely work on it, but in the short term, we also need to find a solution, right? So I'm always a big fan of go see, be curious towards your own emotions that come up, like, hey, this triggered me. Hey, I feel like this. What does this tell me? And follow it down the rabbit hole. But in the same time, you got a session to play tomorrow. So let's also try to work on, how we can actually perform tomorrow. What do you actually do? Do you have like a sort of SOS shit? Nothing is that, nothing worked. What do? I have to perform in 5 minutes. Do you have like a to go to? Like, do you do? I think you mentioned already meditation. Maybe you do some breathing exercises. Anything that you would like to go to?
Jesus, do I have an SOS? I don't know about that. I hope ideally I never get to that state. I don't really know the last time I was trying to think of any kind of experience like that to fall back on and use. I think, yeah, you sort of hope that you're able to manage yourself well enough during that session that you're never going to get to that state. But I guess if I do, then yeah, probably meditation somehow is the way. Screaming is great if you have the chance. Just like, shout into a pillow if there's someone for 20 seconds is beautiful. A way to get out some tilt if you really want to. And have that time. Why not just let out some energies, honestly, like really kind of powerful and liberating if you want to. Is that like, it sounds funny, but like it can actually be a very nice therapeutic thing if you want to do it and you're not bothering somebody else, if you're just doing it in your bedroom or whatever. But yeah, probably just some kind of meditation or just clearing my mind and pausing and doing nothing for that time that I'm able to.
Yeah, I would say a combination of those two would be ideal, right? You let it all out, and most probably, all the energy, and then you sit down and like take a couple of deep breaths and just calm down, and then you're ready to go, right? But yeah, letting it out. Actually, I changed maybe in the last half year or year, so I kind of changed my philosophy around that. I was always kind of trying to control, but just having moments where you just let anger out is actually great. Like, I've always in my life tried to sort of manage it, but then at some point they were like, no. Anger is okay. You can just let it out. But I guess I was conditioned that, you shouldn't express your anger but then they taught me like, no, in a controlled environment, you put a bunch of pillows on your bed and you just start smacking and screaming. And I did that for like a couple of minutes. Like, wow, this actually feels amazing.
It's great. Absolutely. I would genuinely encourage it. It's a lot of fun. And yeah, as you said, like there's nothing wrong with letting anger out, assuming whatever you're hitting isn't another person. The pillows aren't going to do anything about it, and they're not going to hate you for it. You look like you're about to say something.
But that's the thing, right? You're way less likely to hit another person because like hitting another person would be a leakage of piled up anger, right? Whereas if you just like any other routine thing that you do with either your car or your bike or whatever, a routine, let it out so it doesn't accumulate to the fact that at some point, you break your mouse, you break someone's nose, right?
Absolutely. I think I'm sure I've done that before. Like just genuinely, just like gone into my car and just like shouted for 20 seconds during a break. Honestly, it's great, really freeing. And as you said, like conditioning is a thing. I can relate to what you're saying there. I understand that from like if you think anger is a bad thing, but normally I think most people will think that of like anger at somebody else as well. So that's why they might have like the conditioning issue there. But genuinely, otherwise, I think to yourself or however, it's very healthy and powerful to feel it, embrace it, even, or let it out. Yeah.
I saw during the conversation that you're wearing an aura ring, which basically tracks metrics in your body.
Really?
You before that you guys talked about when you take a break. Do you use any of the data collected on your aura to make decisions around your grind, or do you track any other things to help you decide, what you should be doing the rest of your day, or like, for example, data that you can gather around scoops and WCOOPs to prepare to approach it in a better way next time?
And when you say next time, do you mean for like a following series from that? Or
For example, are there like certain things you track? For example, we had a couple of guests on the podcast. One actually literally tracked how happy he was playing poker. And then in the end, he quit poker because he realized that, hey, when I play poker, I'm less happy than if I play poker. So that was kind of the conclusion of that. Or we had, for example, we had a guy who tracked his long sessions. I think every time when he pushed sessions longer than he should. And he just came to a conclusion at some point, my game just deteriorates so many that I'm just going to put a hard stop on 4-hour sessions, for example.
well, I mean, these are great realizations. God, I mean, honestly, I probably also realized that generally I'm less happy playing poker than when I am otherwise as well, actually. Sort of going on I guess, a tangent there, but especially I think for like an online series, like when they talked about how much of a sacrifice it is, I think definitely I'm less happy, especially like during the times of playing poker and otherwise. But then again, if I listen to that, I would have less money if I do, But I think generally it's, something that is real as well. But that's probably a side point. I was going to also answer your other questions. I mostly use it for tracking my like health, physical stuff, mostly like for workouts and energy, things like this. I would mostly try to listen to my body in most ways. Like, oh, do I want to have a workout today? If I do, how hard do I want to go? Do I want to lift whatever? And then like also look at it as additional data, as you said, and that might kind of influence me. Like if I'm on the fence of whether I want to go and I look at my data and it's great, then, I might still go, or I might try to push myself more based on that. But generally, I try to mostly listen to myself, especially with poker too. I think that this I wouldn't really use based on wanting to play at all. I think that's just for how I feel that day. And generally, like during the series, I'm still just like forcing myself to play, even if I don't want to. It's sadly the case that I'm just like feeling that obligation of like, okay, it's Scoop, it's once a year, twice a year if you can WCOOP, but it's like, okay, this is it. This is what I'm doing for this time. I'm going to force myself to grind as an obligation. And I think actually this might be the first year where I might not take that mindset quite as much, because I've found out in the past from this that it just does make me probably less miserable over that time. And especially if I burn out a bit more, and especially like I have the World Series straight after, it's really brutal. And I have not taken the day off. Like I took one day off from Scoop last year and WCOOP, like, so maybe one other during the series. But I think this will be the first year where I allow myself to take more than one day off if I want to, for my own happiness and health, really. And actually also just my poker game. I think when I'm forcing myself to play, as we talked about it before, forcing myself when I don't want to, I think I don't play quite as well. it's also an additional thing where, you know, your ROIs drop, so it's less worth it for you to play on those days too.
When is poker most enjoyable for you, and how can we maybe use this answer to reignite some of that fire, right? To make poker more fun.
Yeah, I like it. I think for me, it's most fun when I'm playing a format that I enjoy, which is mostly mixed games. It's a kind of semi-casual environment in a way, and against friends that both I get along well with, but can also challenge me as well. So realistically, for me, maybe the most fun, it's close, but it's either the PGT Mixed Game Series or the World Series. So the PGT Mixed Game Series, for example, that just happened, I know at least half the people in there, like the biggest field actually got 140 something people. So, but I know most of the people there, and it's, you know, there's banter, there's camaraderie, there's some rivalry, there's things that are kind of, you know, it makes things interesting and fun, but it's just like a very cool atmosphere there. It's sort of laid back in the way that, you know, it's in the studio. They kind of take care of you in that way. It's nice. And I do also enjoy kind of the deeper runs, like the final table runs as well. Like, it's fun for me, but I think realistically, I've sort of come to accept that actually that's probably just more stressful for me than it's like cool, but it's more stressful than it is fun, probably. And it's more like I'm trying to play my best, I'm trying to be very clinical, all these kind of things where like my approach is less casual. So it's more kind of those earlier stage tables, or in a cash game as well, I think as well. I don't play cash games as much as I used to, but they have that kind of more laid back casual atmosphere as well too. And in a scenario, it's less like, you know, you're trying to take people's rent money or their last money in a ruthless way, then it's just conducive to more fun.
Big shout out to our sponsors. First up, CoinPoker. CoinPoker is one of the fastest growing poker rooms in the world right now. In a world where sites seem to care less and less about the players, CoinPoker is showing good promise, listening to the community, and provide a safe and sustainable playing environment going forward. Join the action and get 33% rakeback and 150% deposit bonus using code TMOP, or register using the link in the description down below. Next up, GTO Wizard. If you are looking to level up your poker game, let me tell you about GTO Wizard. It's got everything you need to improve, whether you're just starting out or already crushing it. You've got tools like a hand history analyzer, a GTO trainer, and even custom drills to help you sharpen your skills and make smarter plays. It's what so many guests we have had on use to dominate cash games and tournaments. Get started for free, get 10% off your first purchase using the link down below, gtowizard.com/mechanics. If you sign up, you also get access to the weekly coaching webinars where you can learn from me and other great coaches. So looking forward to educating you guys over there. But without further ado, let's continue chatting with Benny. It took you 5 years to get to the stakes that you're playing today. Looking back, what do you think you could have done differently or better to improve the speed of that journey?
Yeah, probably a few things. I mean, I was playing like the limit games in my early journey. In a way, they were just tough to beat with the rake and being limit games at low stakes. It was quite tough. So some of the games that I focused on playing at those times was more for reasons of interest and like trying to get better, rather than focusing on potentially like moving up the stakes, moving up my bankroll as quick as I could, which is obviously not necessarily a bad thing. Like it made me a better player, you know, so it made me more the player I am today, but it probably held me back in certain ways. Like it definitely held me back in stakes for quite a while. Where, as I said, it was probably a few years of playing and I was still at like 3, 6, 4, 8 limits for a while. And was probably not as money-minded about that as I could have been. And I think I also could have sought out resources probably better, whether it's like a community at that time. Like eventually I got into, you know, 2+2 and things like that. I had a nicer community around me, had more friends, and could discuss various things like that. And that was helpful, but earlier I didn't so much. I was sort of playing a bit more myself when the first couple of years at least. And also I was probably a nit in some bankroll ways as well, where I was probably too conservative in I mean, in a reasonable way, but in like not shot taking necessarily, and like selling action in good spots like the World Series. I probably was too much of a nit for a couple of years and did not have the bankroll boost I necessarily could have had I not been such a nit in selling. And
how did you overcome that? Like a lot of people struggle with this, like risk aversion, being too nitty.
Yeah. So I was going to say it's like the mental game thing for me, where for a while it was still tough for me to potentially lose like X money in a day or in a tournament. And obviously there is conditioning. Like for a while you get sort of used to, you know, losing 10K in a day, whatever, or however much, where it was tough because it's like very clearly the real world amount was feeling quite deeply instilled in me, probably, where I'm still equating it to real world things. So actually I remember having a conversation with a good friend of mine, Dylan Lindy, probably like 9 years ago or something. So this was like after I'd won my bracelet, but I was still like being quite a nit. And I was saying to him how like online, like I could be sitting here or sitting at these cash stakes or something, but like I would still want to sell for them. Or same with these tournaments, like because I don't feel comfortable losing like 4 figures every day. And he just says to me, you should be playing these. You should be kind of comfortable with losing these. Like, you know, you're good enough. It will like help you in these kind of things. And I think that helped me in a way. It still felt difficult for me for a while to tune it out from the real world monetary value. Really, it is a difficult thing, and it's probably quite a personal thing as well. It might be difficult to just give general advice for that. For example, like a lot of the friends that I had around that time were not doing so well financially. Like, you know, like college friends or something like this, where they're still trying to work a second job or something like this, that they're struggling to see. And that was like often like a grounding thing for me in terms of real world monetary value, which in a way is a positive, in a way is a negative, because when you're seeing poker buy-ins as that, it can just hold you back, where you think, God, I've lost 10K in a day. You kind of feel suffering for this because of thinking about how much it can do in the real world, something like this as well. And I would still have that feeling. So it's just a way of conditioning. Experience was a big thing for me, just trying to get through it. And obviously building a bankroll is an important thing. It's just a very large thing. I'm not wearing leather up, but it's a very important thing in terms of how you might think of your monetary losses or gains, essentially, too, as well. I felt more confident losing, or not losing more, but playing higher stakes, playing for more of myself when my bankroll was doing better, and it's less going to affect my life. Having the recognition that realistically, it's not going to affect my life. If I lose this amount in a day, a week, or 5 times this amount in a week, it's not really going to realistically affect my life. I think is probably the biggest thing. If you can kind of try and feel into that as much as you can, feel if it's going to realistically change your life. Are you still just going to be playing the same amount of poker? What is it going to change, if anything? Might it knock your confidence? Might you just drop a bit lower in stakes? Also, if you might play differently, if you're staked or at a certain stake, is an important thing as well. But that's, again, quite an individual thing. I think, well, I would like to think that I always play similarly in terms of ability for however much I have of myself or what the stakes are, like within reason. And that's also a very important thing, to have that comfort to be able to do that. And yeah, just having the feeling of the cushion and the comfortability in real world is important. If you can.
Yeah, remind me a bit of what Adam actually said earlier in the conversation about thinking about, okay, what's like the worst thing that can happen, and feeling that, and then realizing that everything is still okay. If it's not okay, then maybe, you should recalibrate how much risk you're willing to take, right? And get to the level of risk where, like, okay, worst case scenario, I'm still okay. Because it's indeed usually we make it way worse in our head than what it actually is. You mentioned that at some point you came across resources, you joined community, you found more people, 2+2. Has there ever been a coach or like a study partner who had a major impact on your game? And if so, what is the most important lesson that person taught you?
Yeah, I mean, there have been lots of friends I've spoken to over the years, particularly for mixed game, and like throughout my career, we kind of rose up at the same time. The person I spoke most with is Adam Owen, and he's a very successful, talented UK player for anybody who might not know him. Especially in mixed games, he's had outrageous net limit results too, in very huge scores. But things he taught me, especially when I was kind of rising up, like we started becoming good friends about 10 years ago. Well, actually a bit longer, so a good year or so before my bracelet. So like about 11 years ago. And really it was his creativity and out-the-box thinking and not being afraid to look like an idiot. Like, these were really important concepts for me. Like, I would still often feel insecure about things, and he wouldn't care. And in a way, I admire that, and always had done. And there were various kind of things that he was doing that, or thinking about, that were non-standard in a way, that were very interesting. And his kind of a good friend as well at the time and sort of mentor was Cal as well, who's one of the most non-standard poker players of all time, I think it's fair to say. And he's also a very creative, interesting player. So he took a lot from him. And there are lots of like strategies in that way that help to kind of broaden my thinking and broaden my horizon of even like experimentation in ways of not being afraid to look like an idiot, that you can just actually like experiment with things. And if this works, if you think it's good, you can keep doing it. And that was also an important thing of just like trying to get better, trying to think out the box creatively. And all those ways that kind of translated my scope throughout my career, I think was very helpful and impactful.
What would you say has been some of the most out-of-the-box strategies you started to experiment with? Maybe one that actually did make you look like an idiot.
Wow.
Or at least in hindsight, you felt that way.
So some of the things like have even like since like turned out to be good. At the time, I thought it was weird, but there's certain things like it was like that long ago, like 9 years ago, where I basically first discovered through him that like limping in RAS tournaments is good. And like everyone else thought that was weird. There's like 3 people in the world who did that or something. And everyone else thought it was weird. I thought it was weird at the time. Even like infinite elite RAS players thought it was weird at the time. Now more people do it as a reasonable strategy. And like that was one thing as an example. Also, even I would remember like 1 or 2 kind of quite major exploits there were like in like heads up sitting goes, like no limit single draw for limping as well, where he would limp like 100% of hands or like something outrageous. Like that was definitely like too much. He would take things like to way extreme sometimes, like where it's just like too much. Like this is clearly absurd. But in certain scenarios, like I remember there was just like one opponent that he would just like regularly play and like consistently do that absurd scenario. I think it was something like limp 100% of hands in no limit single draw sit and goes, where he was just destroying him with it. And like it did just really make me think like, is like these like real exploits that are just so absurd can just like potentially be profitable if you make them work for you in certain ways and if you have the right scenario like against the right opponents. And I think like that has clearly since turned out to not be an optimal strategy, especially for single draw. I think that's probably the most outrageous one. I mean, there are other things like limping in no limit tournaments outrageously wide from like under the gun as well. That was back in the day. I remember like him and Cal just really egregiously like limp. I still remember one thing in Cal in a World Series event. He's at the table over for me. We were in a conversation and we were talking, and then it's his turn under the gun to act. This was again like 9 years ago, and the dealer's telling him it's his turn, and he was like thinking, well, as he's talking to me, he hasn't looked at his cards. He's like, oh yeah, I'll just like, he limps blind. He's like, I know I'm going to do this anyway, so I'll just limp blind. Like this is like the outrageous kind of things that he would just do that, you know, clearly we now know is not optimal, but it still just broadened my creative thinking in a few ways. That was cool.
Yeah, and sometimes it's the over adjustment and over application through which you get immediate the most amount of feedback, right? So you can kind of recalibrate your strategy. Actually, I was always throughout my career I did strategy a lot with one guy, and we both kind of had the opposite approaches. We get one thing, he would be hyper to the other side. He would apply it massively and then kind of recalibrate. And I would start slowly, starting with the best spot, and then we would end up meeting in the middle somewhere, right? We would agree. But to be fair, he would have gathered more feedback. So if you're okay with just using your confidence and going for it, why not? I think, and it's like you said, it's not necessarily that strategy itself. Maybe you learn something, you get into a situation that then triggers you to think different about a completely different spot, right? That helps. But in general, just the things that then open up. Wow, if this is possible, then what else is possible, right?
Absolutely, yeah. So I think like trial by fire is a real thing. Assuming it's in environments where you can afford to get it wrong, then I think it's absolutely important, assuming that you're able to take the feedback that you get in appropriate ways and actually be critical about that feedback and analyze it and be like, okay, maybe this isn't working, rather than think about it and think, oh, I should try more just because it didn't work this time, So actually like being aware about the results and feedback.
Experimenting, right? Not just being stubborn and try to prove that you're right.
Exactly, yeah.
You bounced, across a wide range of formats over your career. What has been like the biggest benefits and downsides of bouncing around so many formats?
Yeah, good question. I think it probably hurt my profitability in certain ways, where I think I probably just would have been more profitable had I just focused on like one or two specific things and just become the best in the world at whatever one or two things, rather than, like whatever the 20th or the 5 things, where like there's clearly a drop off in that way. And I think doing that in my career probably didn't make me the most money, frankly, for a while. But like, it depends what you're looking for. I think it allowed me more fun. I think variety is important. I think had I specialized in one or two things, probably might have been less fun for me, especially if like those were no limit hold'em tournaments. Like, I just generally find those not very fun and painful and not as enjoyable as other things like mixed. So I think variety for me has been important in terms of both not being bored and sort of being hungry in a way for different things, and even like learning different things, looking at different things. But I would say it also makes studying difficult in some ways, where a lot of the time I sort of honestly feel like I don't know what I'm going to study today or this week. Like, I could just try a whole bunch of different things. So it's not very structured in that way, which probably makes it less good, I would say. And obviously results in me not being able to be quite as good at one or two particular things that everyone else is, if that's all they're studying. So obviously I'm worse at no limit hold'em when I have 10 games to study than if someone is only studying no limit hold'em as well. So there's that. But I'd say it's also just like broadened my horizons in terms of my ability of what I want to play. And there are obviously like other profitable avenues too if I want. And what's the other thing? I think it just overall made me a better poker player when I was initially learning. Just learning new games and getting better at other games in certain ways and thinking about them probably made my other games better in certain ways, I would like to think. Like, both thinking about a game in kind of fundamental theoretical ways and also potential like maneuverable exploits that you might be able to think, I could maybe do this in this other game as well. So I think that was also a cool aspect.
Yeah, I was gonna say that. Did you ever have like a big aha moment studying one game while you were, but the aha moment was actually for a completely different game? It's like, oh wait, but if this is true in Raz, then in Deuce to 7, how would that apply there? Or doesn't it work like that?
Well, it works a little bit like that. I guess it depends. Some of the aha moments, I guess, were mostly sort of linked. For example, like if playing heads up limit hold'em and I was understanding board textures very well and thresholds of like the thinnest value bets, like these kind of things, that definitely helped my no limit game. Where am I going to find, like, how thin can I go for value, and how board texture is going to change how thin I can go for value, as well as just like hand reading. That definitely helped. But obviously those games are like very strongly linked. I think as far as like very different games, I don't know. There are maybe like some stud games crossovers that have similar concepts that I've thought about in the past. Like if you're trying to think where you might find bluffs from in certain scenarios, where if you figure out one in Raz, you might think, how could I also do that in stud high? Like these kind of things as well. Draw, I think not so much. I think that's often like a less intuitive game in that scenario. In certain ways, at least, that it might just take more draw experience specifically in order to get better there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I actually Googled the definition of a specialist, and it says a person who concentrates primarily on a particular subject or activity, right? So that got me thinking, can you actually be a mixed game specialist? Or is that by definition impossible, since mixed game obviously requires you to spread across many formats?
Yeah, fair question. I guess it depends on the individual for the answer there. It's sort of like a jack of all trades thing, but I guess it's a specialist if you count mixed games as one thing. Then it's like, okay, if that's the sole thing, but if it's a plural, then I guess technically no, unless there are maybe like a couple of games I would say I specialize in as stronger games, but I could say prioritize mixed games or whatever the wording could be that fits the technical definition.
In mixed games, does the edge come from mastering every format or sucking the least in all formats? You know, is it about minimizing your weaknesses, or is it about maximizing your strength, given the fact that, you know, you have so many formats to study?
Yeah, good question. I think, well, it sort of depends how much you might suck, right? Like, if you're so much lower than everybody else, clearly there's going to be more EV in bringing that back end up by a lot. If a lot of your games are similar, then it might depend, really. And even you can potentially focus on higher edge games, like higher ROI games, in order to improve your ROI in those games. Like, let's say probably there's more scope for improvement in ROI in the big bet games, No Limit, Pillow, and Single Draw, than, let's say, stud. There's going to be a lot of sort of mediocre to slightly weaker players making like somewhat losing mistakes, but they're not really costing you a ton of EV maybe. And like the best stud players maybe not like hugely making a lot more EV than the good or mediocre stud players. In comparison to other games, I think it's more important to be better. There's a larger edge in those games between the best and someone who's just like mediocre or good in No Limit, Single Draw, and PLO. I think there's a bigger difference there. So if you want to focus on those, I think that would be more important as well. as well as not sucking to at least a baseline level, like having at least a reasonable kind of baseline that you're gonna play relatively solid in those games. I think is a probably reasonable approach, and then depending on the event or the table for how much you might want to target your opponents in games in that way to what you want to improve.
So if I got from that, basically it's both. You try to suck less in the games where the room for edge, I guess, is smaller. And you try to maximize your strengths in the games where there's actually more to maximize on, more to capitalize on.
I think so, yeah. I think that's fair to say. I would guess, like, as a general rule, I'd hope most people would agree with that, yeah.
I read that you are naturally mathematically minded. Does it help you in studying a wide range of games?
I would hope so. Just the way of somehow you naturally can analyze things, hopefully a bit more easier than otherwise. I'd say it didn't make it easier for me to like study solver outputs though, and like finding heuristics and patterns, I think, is a different skill to that. So I think that still didn't come very easily to me, especially in No Limit Hold'em. I had difficulty there with studying those kind of solver outputs and finding reasons why. Like, that was important for me. Like, I think in order for execution to be good kind of across the board and have transferable concepts, it's important for me to work out why things are happening. And I still couldn't necessarily translate that from a solver. Then that was still tough for me for No Limit Hold'em especially. For studying other games, I think probably did help me, yeah, in terms of just more clearly seeing, say, a range versus range in Pro Poker Tool, something like this, just like percentages of how that's going to work, even in regards to kind of like pot odds you need or something like this, how profitable of a jam range you can have in No Limit 08, for example, with the anti-structure, and then maybe how you can adjust that by somebody's calling range. So I think those kind of things were probably helpful. And looking at odds like that, I think was reasonably straightforward for me, yeah.
Over the years, you've also developed a passion for coaching. Our audience loves to be taught, same as me. So I want to do a little mixed game coaching session with you right here on the pod. Now, every game is obviously different. It's still poker, so maybe we should start off with the common ground. So what do all poker formats have in common? Maybe we can use No Limit Hold'em to explain this, since that's what both me and probably the audience is most familiar with. You already mentioned, for example, range versus range, odds. You know, these things I assume remain the same, right? I have limited knowledge about all games, okay? If you give me 4 cards, I know a little bit, but after that, I'm lost.
Yeah, these things do generally remain the same. There's still going to be a range versus another range, and especially in different positions and in tournaments, for example, you're incentivized to deal the blinds. You're obviously incentivized to accumulate chips. The blinds are going to go up. You're trying to get chips from winning the blinds. That's theoretically the easiest way to win chips, is if everybody folds in that way. Limit games are even more incentivized to do that, actually, because the blinds are relatively doubled in that, and they're just relatively even more important. So winning blinds that way is more important for you. A lesson there if you want. And even to the point of where you might play more 3-bets in limit in certain scenarios in order to try and knock the blinds out, in order to just try and win the pot versus the other person. So in limit hold'em or 08, for example, then the button might be 3-betting like almost all their hands versus the cutter, for example, essentially just trying to win the blinds. And then if you chop from there, that's fine. You've chopped the blinds, that's still a profitable result. And range versus range still applies in all games. Let's say stud games. You can probably intuitively think these kind of things where if under the gun has opened, he's probably got a tighter range than if the person last to act opens there in the steal position. So these are kind of things that hopefully thinking poker players can intuit in some ways and transfer to other games. And as far as like just general poker concepts go, then your EV from things is going to come from your value hands, and you're going to have essentially your bluffs, your offsets from the value hands, which you should work around. Think about how you're going to have those in every scenario, in every game, basically.
All right. Well, that's at least the common ground. Now, as for let's keep it to mistakes to avoid, right? We would all like to be excellent, but I don't think that's realistic in the time frame that we have. So let's try to focus on sucking less. Let's go like game by game and give like some tips. Okay, this is very important in this game. Don't do this. Do not screw up, right? Let's start with that. You already touched a little bit on limit. What changes if we get dealt 4 cards compared to 2 cards, for example, right? We switch to PLO. What do we have to take in consideration in order to not suck?
In order to not suck. Well, PLO equities run closer than in no limit. You get 4 cards, more chances with more cards, more things can happen. So then, obviously, more chances to make the nuts. The value thresholds of things are now going to go down post-flop. So, the second or third not flush by the river on an unpaired board might not be as valuable as no limit. Might not be worth as much as a pot bet in whatever scenario. Similarly, the board has paired on the river, second or third not flush, now not looking so great, might not necessarily be worth triple barreling, whatever it is. So these kind of things on a sort of basic level to watch out for, to think of just, not making huge mistakes in that way. PLO tournaments, assuming they have antes, is an important thing, because otherwise, no anti-PLO tournaments, unfortunately, the answer is to play kind of quite tragically tight in a lot of scenarios. And obviously, at certain stack depth, it's going to change. Higher stack depths, it's more important to make the nuts. Similar with no limit, like the pots are going to get bigger.
Yeah.
More important to do this. In PLO, don't fold to 3-bets very often. In fact, very rarely in a lot of scenarios. But obviously, if you have opponents that you think they're only 3-betting aces, you would rather call hands that do better against aces than worse. So you can hopefully intuit that something like ace king 7-3 or something with a 7 high suit, sort of reasonable as raw equity hand, but against the 3-bet versus opponent who's doing that with probably only aces, very bad hand. Probably just fold. You'd rather have the like 9-8-6-5 double suited by a long way. So in order to also hopefully not make yourself transparent, try not to also only 3-bet aces, so you can hopefully try to see these concepts from both sides of the spectrum as well, to try to make yourself tougher to play against. That covers.
And what about the fact that you know 4 cards in the deck instead of 2? Does that become increasingly more important in your decision making?
It does. you can think about how those other 2 cards might interact with the boards in certain scenarios. So if you want to get into some further kind of in-depth strategy where you might have a turn spot, or I mean, I guess it can even apply on every street, but in a way where you might sort of randomize a frequency in no limit for if you're c-betting something half the time on the flop or turn. Now in PLO, you have other 2 cards that might help your decision in that, where if you have no relevant blockers, you might just turn that c-bet to 0, and if you have helpful ones, you might just turn it to 100 and use those as your potential randomizer if that's how you want to do it. Also, the other thing is card removal is more important, where if you're the button now and however many 5 people have folded in front of you, this is now more meaningful when it's 20 cards that have folded in front of you rather than just 10. So now your button range is probably going to be different when it's 8-handed than versus when it's 3-handed as well.
Yeah, I think they call it the bunching effect.
Yes.
Could be wrong here.
Yeah, so like it would like bunch.
Yeah, I mean, it's already a thing in No Limit Hold'em, but yeah, I can imagine PLO. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
So 8-handed tournament, you're small blind first in. It's not as great as that it initially looks.
No, not really. I mean, again, without antes, that's going to be tied up for no noise.
But what if we let me see, what's the next game? I guess we have Oma, and then we have the high-low variant, I guess. This is the one that you were playing mostly, correct? In the beginning of your career. Oma 8, high, low, better. Help me out here.
Yes, correct, yes. High-low, 08 is probably the easiest shorthand. Omaha 8 is the 8 or better. And just 08 is limit. If you say that, if you want, you can say LO8 or FLO8, but generally...
Is it automatically high-low? Or is that then a new variant?
So 8 is the 8 or better means high-low.
Okay.
So to clarify, the low element has to be 5 cards that are 8 or better. Unpaired. I hope that makes sense. So every time it's 8 or better, then it's high-low. There's generally not ever a high-low that is different to 8 or better. High-low as a format is basically always that. Same with stud 8, for example. Stud high-low, that's the same thing. And
So how does high-low change things?
A lot. There is often going to be a pot that is chopped. And often you're going to want to try to not have that happen. Often either by trying to win the pot at some point and making your opponent fold, or scooping. So showdowns or not are going to become more important in this game. Generally, you're actually incentivized to just try to get people to fold more often than not. So yeah, Limit 08 was what I played a lot of in cash back in the day, just as a grind for like Supernova, for example. And is still one of my best games these days. And the high-low aspect, trying to think how to sort of basically say, you often want to have hands that are going to be able to win both sides of the pot generally. So hands that have both some high and low equity are best. Otherwise, if you think your hand can only win half of the pot, then in a way you want to build that half of the pot and have more people into the pot. So it can be a potentially creative game in terms of how you can maneuver the action for how many people you want in the pot based on the hand that you have, and also its interaction with the board, but that applies both pre-flop and post-flop. So if you have ace deuce 3-4, for example, in the hijack and the low jack has opened, you have a very, very good low hand. It might not necessarily have high capability, and also can just completely brick the flop if it comes queen jack 9. Then you can just flat call in that scenario, and then you either can let more people into the pot and thus build like the low part of it when you are going to have a very good low hand, or in a way minimize your loss when it comes queen jack 9. And it's like, okay, I've lost 2 big blinds, I'm out. And similarly, you can do that with high hands as well if you want, and you have the king queen jack 10 double. Similar kind of concept's going to happen. You can potentially flat that. It's not such a great hand necessarily in this game, but hypothetically, if you were supposed to flat that, or like king queen jack double, something like this, then if the board is 3, 4, 5 and there are 4 people in there, you can just fold for 1 bet. Otherwise, when it does come high, you can curate the action in a way of letting more people in to win a higher, larger pot that way eventually.
Yeah, it seems very similar in live cash, no limit hold'em. If you play a double board, it's kind of the same, right? You either want to bluff the other guy off the chop, or you want more money to chop it up.
Absolutely, yeah. So
very similar.
Yeah, let's say that there's a river scenario in 3 ways, and you have one knocked up and not on either, not on the other. Then if you bet pot, then you either want 2 calls or 0 calls. It's kind of the thing. And same with stud A2. It's the concept of push-pull, where you can kind of either pull people into the pot or like push them out if you want to try to get a heads up.
All right. Well, let's switch to, I guess, stud, because that's also a high-low variant.
Mm-hmm.
I think the main thing that now changes is there's no more public cards, but you get all cards dealt to you, correct?
Correct. So stud, 2 down cards, 1 up. Everyone can see your up card. So more information this way. This is important to try and remember that information. So if you're a beginner to stud, then you want to try to remember what other people's up cards are, because then you just have more information. You know that 7 of spades is there, or you know this person has their ace of clubs, so it's less likely that this other person has a pair of aces if they're in the other seat. So this is obviously going to be valuable to you. Same with in Raz, this is very important, like not the suits, but if you just know the dead cards are deuce, deuce, 5, 5, and you're playing against someone else who has a 4 up but then catches a 5, you know it's very unlikely they've paired their 5. So these kind of reasons where it's important. And then, yeah, you get the next 3 cards all up. So 4th, 5th, and 6th, as you'd call it, up, and then 7th is face down. So to you personally. And then there are antes, everybody antes, and there is what's called a bring in. So it's the worst up card brings in, where the action is then going to start from there. It's almost like a blind, it's a forced bet. So in stud high, the worst possible card is a deuce of clubs. The suits also go in alphabetical order, where clubs is the worst. So if someone else has a deuce of spades, another person has deuce of clubs, the deuce of clubs is the bring in, and they're going to put in some amount. Let's say it's 2 antes of an amount, and then action goes from the person straight after the bring in, and it goes around in that same clockwise order. So again, this is where positions are important, where under the gun is now to the person to the right of the bring in. His range is going to be a lot tighter in pretty much every game than if they're second last to act, but it depends on people's up cards. So if it's in Raz and the person left of right of the bring in is a deuce, then no, it is left of the bring. Then it is a deuce, and then everybody else has kings and queens, then they could steal very liberally. So you'd still probably call it a steal in that regard, but it's obviously like a very favorable board. Same with stud high. If the person under the gun has an ace and everyone else has 2s and 3s, ace can also steal very liberally as well. So
Yeah, so that's kind of the bluffing. You're kind of representing your up card. So basically, you know the up card. So if you have good up cards, but your down cards are shit, hey, they don't know. And if they have shitty up cards, well, it's unlikely they have a hand. Can you then also, like, from a bluffing aspect, let's say you have good up card showing, but I've bad up card showing, but I still show aggression, then I'm basically representing that my down cards are very bad. Or how does that work? Is that kind of the bluffing aspect?
yeah, absolutely. I mean, hopefully most people can kind of figure that out, that like obviously the bluffing aspect happens a lot where people are representing something and you can kind of have some discernment for that. But remember, this is a limit game, so it's kind of limited in how much the bluffing can be done in a way. And you know, on a river scenario in a limit game, you still want your frequencies to be reasonable, where if the player is getting 10 to 1, you know, they just call 1 in 10 times to have a profitable call. So if you're bluffing half the time, it's not great like that on the river. So you
Do they ever play it in a non-limit format? Because then I can see bluffing. You know, you have shitty whole card showing, but you do put your stack, and it's like, well, you decide if my other cards are better or not.
Yes, but it's pretty rare, frankly. It's probably not the best game. I've played it like once, maybe twice in my life. Like it's been pot limit as well, but it's almost never played as no limit any of the games. But I played it like pot limit like once or twice, and it's definitely an interesting game. But yeah, pretty rare.
Then I guess Raz is the next, right? That's most similar. That's kind of for the people that always complain that they run bad, because now you shouldn't make a hand, right?
Yeah, but then again, Raz is probably the game where people complain most about, actually, kind of ironically in that way, because that's a game where it's very run out dependent. Like you can start with ace, deuce, 3 in the hole. That's the best possible 3 starting cards in Raz. But you can just run out the king, king, queen, jack, and then, you know, you're going to have a bad time. Or even like you're just going to have to automatically fold fifth or something if you catch king, king, and your opponent's board is 3, 4, 5. You know, so it's probably the one that's most susceptible to people moaning about because of the boards, because there's just nothing they can do. They just have to fold fifth or sixth automatically because that's what the dealer has dealt them. You know, it's yeah.
So what's kind of the, like in both stud and res, what is the skill aspect? I'm trying to obviously I understand that the skill, but how can we leverage the skill aspect if we cannot bluff people off our hands? And is it just, like you said, keeping track of what's the card, so who can best memorize and understand how the card removal increases chances of someone having hands and not having hands?
The memorization is a small aspect, but it's like relatively small in terms of what the overall skill are. There are various things that I think most like thinking poker players are able to translate to. Things like, I mean, as I said, frequencies are going to be important on rivers. So you can kind of think about how you're going to play X hand in order for the river frequencies to be most important. But sure, along the way, you can have a higher bluff frequency if you have more fold equity and you're representing your boards. Another thing is that should be transferable, hopefully, is to not be transparent in certain ways. So hopefully you can think about how you can balance certain scenarios as well, and how to be tougher to play against, and how you can potentially dictate bets in order for that to happen. Like, you know, there are certain still creative plays, like you can wait until a later street before you raise, something like this. You can only call on fourth but raise on fifth or sixth, just as an example there, where you might still have a hand. But board reading in general is very important. It's like hand reading in a hold'em, thinking about ranges. You can think about board texture, how it might interact with a range. Someone else in stud is sort of similar, where you're trying to read their board, what it is their most likely hole cards, or what are their whole range of hole cards based on all the action until now, based on their third range. Like if it's a 2-bet on third versus an open and they've re-raised, then their range is obviously going to be a lot more condensed. Similar with like 3-betting in no limit. It's a much more, well, the range is going to be structured in a certain way. Whereas, let's say they flat +1 versus under the gun, that's a more specifically condensed range in certain scenarios. But it's a range that's going to be shaped in certain ways. So think, given that range and then how their board has run out, sort of their most likely range of hands, how are you doing versus that range? And then another important concept is visibility and equity realization, where you can think about that in no limit too, where let's say you're big blind versus under the gun, and it's a board that's very favorable for the under the gun opener, like, ace, king, jack, and you've defended the jack deuce suited, or something like this, where you might have correct price to call flop versus B50 or something, but it's not a great scenario without a backdoor flush draw, because your equity realization on later streets is obviously going to be very poor. So think about how many scenarios you might have to just essentially automatically fold on a later street in a stud. So in Raz, let's say you have kind of a close fifth call scenario. Think about, are you going to be able to realize that equity on sixth? Or are you just going to have to automatically fold on like 30% of the deck, which might just happen very easily, where the opponent's board is 3, 4, 5, whatever. If they just catch ace, deuce, 6, 7, all these cards that you're just going to have to automatically fold if your board is 3, like you have 3, 4, 5, whatever it is, and have paint. So these scenarios that hopefully, if you're a kind of a deep thinking poker player, you can think about in certain ways to help you make plus EV decisions, I hope.
Maybe also something important to add. Actually, you explained me this prior to the podcast, that even though limit games, there's less betting volume, I guess, but you did mention that in a 10-game mix, for example, these games play way bigger, right? The blinds are way bigger. So investing that one bet more with bad equity retention actually can be quite a big proportion of your stack, correct? Like even like in my head when I think limits, cash game, but these limit bets, there actually can be every bet you really have to think about, because you don't have so many bets, correct?
Absolutely, yeah. Especially on later streets, so turns and rivers, when it's a big bet, they're called the big bet streets. When they double versus the flop, then they're absolutely more meaningful, yeah.
Great. I think the last 2 games, correct me if I'm wrong, Deuces have a triple dot, but Badugi. Any quick insights for players who've never touched on these formats?
Yeah, so there's also No Limit Single Draw is the other game of 10 game as well.
Okay.
Then if you...
Which is...
seems like you did.
No clue. Is that the Mafia Poker?
Mafia Poker?
Yeah, where it's like in the past you have the gangster, they have 5 hands and they...
I think you're thinking...
I call that Mafia Poker. I don't know what the correct term is.
High that you're thinking of? Just 5-card draw?
Yeah, like a draw game, right? You stand pat.
Yes, so I think that the Mafia Poker is 5-card draw high, where it's just the best absolute 5-card hand, where, Royal Flush is still best, and you have 1 draw streak, which, by the way, is...
But that's not included, correct?
Correct. No, it's included in the dealer's choice, but not in 10 game. But I also think it's a pretty good game, actually, and it's a very tough game to be good at. I think lots of people play it badly, honestly. But that's
really?
like in Scoop, for example, in WCOOP. Yeah, I think that's a game that's very hard to be balanced in, actually. Like, that's one of the toughest games in certain ways that you kind of have to be thinking in-depthly about, that most people don't do because they hardly ever play it. So I think most people, even like good poker players, are not very good at it, frankly. So even sometimes like that's the game I call in a dealer's choice, because I think most people suck at it and don't play it. You agree? But yeah, for the other games, there's No Limit Single Draw, which is actually my favorite game. And that's Deuce to 7, where you have one draw, single draw, and it's no limit both before the draw and after it. So because of that, there's quite a lot of room for maneuverability and some creativity and things like that, where I think people who, don't think about it very deeply, there's a big edge to be had there. And I think it's a very creative game that can be intuitive for thinking poker players. It's a game that has classically been the case where if you're good and then you suddenly like try that for the first time, then you can still have skills that translate to it. You can still be thinking about it in certain cool ways. It's the game that like multiple people had never played it before the World Series and then played it for the first time and won the bracelet in that event. That's happened multiple times. And
so if we wanna rate like raw poker IQ, we put all the Hold'em players in Deuce to 7 and see who's really talented at poker.
Pretty much, yeah. That's genuinely a great way. Like if none of them have ever played it before, I think that would be great. Genuinely. Even for me, I remember that was maybe like one of the first tournaments I won. It was a free roll of like 4,000. It was the first day I've ever played that game. I won the free roll. I still remember on Stars, like infinite years ago. That I was super happy with. So that's my favorite game. I think it's a very good game. And then Triple Draw as well is also one of my best games, where less about bluffing there. Like it's limit your bluffs essentially there. It's tough because most of them either you have to give up equity of drawing. So that's something that's like potentially tough to get your head around as a new player to that game. So that's getting quite advanced into the secrets. I don't know how much I want to go into that. But you're essentially deciding if you want to draw and have equity from the draw or give up the equity that you'd gain in order to now essentially bluff. And then most typically bluffs are going to come after you have drawn, whether it's like a 1-versus-1 scenario where each player has drawn 1 on the third draw. So it's triple draw, there are 3 draws, and then bet after that. But again, there's a limited amount you can do when it's limit. It is also played pot limit and no limit sometimes, but that's rarer. Pot limit does play big. It is in the dealer's choice, and that's also a very tough game to play and be balanced out, like really tough to actually play it well. But in the limit version, you kind of have to have your frequencies relatively in check to not be super exploited. Yeah.
Any other game we missed? Maybe any game that you have personally sort of invented that you really like?
Yeah. I was going to say I forgot about Badugi, actually, your other question there.
Badugi, yeah.
That is, again, an interesting game. It's, again, one of the games that's toughest to be balanced in. In essence, it's simple. So for those that don't know, the rules of Badugi, you want to try and get 4 different suits. It's a full card game with 3 draws, where the best possible hand is ace 2, 3, 4. So it's a low ball game, and they should all ideally be different suits. All the Badugis rank backwards in order, where the worst possible Badugi is going to be King, Queen, Jack 10 of all different suits. The next best hand after that is a 3 card, which is going to be ace 2, 3, and a 4th card of the same suit or of a pair. It has to be unpaired. So I hope that makes sense and can hopefully illustrate why it might be difficult to kind of be balanced in certain ways on later streets in terms of how you're going to bet and raise and how many you're going to draw in certain ways. I think it's a cool game. I sort of have come to like it a bit more than I used to, partly because of those tougher reasons of like trying to figure it out. I used to just sort of think, this is a tough game, and sort of not try and actually be very good at it because of that, because I just realized how it was tough. And then more recently, I think I kind of leaned into it a little bit more, which has increased my enjoyment of it. And I think I've got better at it recently because of that. So I would always encourage people to try all of these games, by the way, especially something like that. It's a very different poker game. Like, that's definitely not going to be something that anyone's used to or has any kind of frame of reference for, where like obviously something like Limit Hold'em to No Limit Hold'em is very close, but Badugi is probably just going to be feeling like an alien game to most people. So generally I would recommend people start with something like No Limit Single Draw, where like some of the transferable concepts are easier to bridge between the two games, and then hopefully dip your feet into the Deuce to 7 triple draw or even Badugi. Like Scoop and places like that where they have the lowest buy-ins, there are great places to try for that. Like the $11 and $22 if you just want to try for the first time. If you don't like it, then fair enough. But yeah, I think they're just very interesting for a game point of view, and even just for your poker mind, hopefully. And is there anything that I've invented? I don't think there's some obscure games that we've played for sure. Not necessarily that I've invented. We've had there are certain sort of more degenerate games, like even like flip games, things like that, where you might start with 7 cards and you have a Hold'em hand, an Omaha hand, and then a 1-card hand, for example, and you're running out boards for each one, and you're playing like these kind of things. There's a couple of common ones in particular. There's one that's been quite popular in places like Vegas the last year and a bit, was Albert flips, which is that concept.
Albert flips.
Albert flips, because a person called Albert invented them. The reason I laughed is because the more common / slightly insulting term for them was Lebanese flips, because Albert's Lebanese. But that's the more common name for it, for how it transpired. But yeah, it's those kind of concepts in essence. And then there's 1 or 2 more concepts that are probably more complicated and might not necessarily need to get into, but it's like a fun game where there's a little bit of skill edge to be had, and it's pretty fun. Like, there's a lot of swings and still a lot of luck involved there. It's a fun game.
Oh, sounds fun. I mean, the last time I played in a home game, we were playing with a mix of No Limit Hold'em players and Omaha players. We were like, well, which game do we play? Because it's obviously not fair, And then we decided that we get dealt 3 cards. So we're not 2, not 4. So we went in the middle. But you can use all 3. So we called it Power Hold'em. So it was good because no one knew what the hell that we were doing. And basically on every flop, basically anyone could have quads, because you can have, for example, 3 3s in your hand and there's a 3 on the flop. And the board might be King A3 rainbow. You're like, Mom, it's pretty good, right? My top 2 pair, or something like that. No, quads. It's obviously very hard to make, and we played it no limit as well. So we call it Power Hold'em. I don't know if they already knew it but I was at least under the assumption that this was the first time everyone was playing it. Which is fun, because then no one has a clue what they're doing.
Yeah, I played that recently, actually. It's a side event at the WPT in Cambodia. It's the first time I played it. It's called Super Hold'em. Yeah.
Super Hold'em. Oh, I thought it was Power Hold'em. That looks... Is it no limit? Or are there any rules that I was not playing?
It was no limit, yeah. So, no, you had it right. That was it. It's no limit, 3 cards. And as you said, it took us like a good 20 minutes at least to work out how to be able to read the board and how to be able to use like all your cards. Like I would just forget.
20 minutes, that's fast, man. I spent it the whole night trying to figure it out.
But it was genuinely really bad. Like people were misreading hands and boards. Like the first time, like I saw a guy get it all in with like 10-8-3 all clubs, and initially I was just thinking like he's just a complete whale. What the hell is he doing? He's just trying to gamble. And then I'm like, oh, you're actually like more likely to make the flush, not less likely to make the flush. Whereas like if you had a tri-suit in PLO or something, you're less likely to make it. And these kind of things as well, where I would just forget that you're able to make quads as you had it as well. And even that you can have two pairs in very weird scenarios as well. Like the board can be King 8-3 and your hand can be 5-5-8. Then you have two pair. That scenario. And the reason I was putting my face in my hand a bit when you were saying that is because I was remembering some of the things in Cambodia. The guy who actually finished 5th on the final table. So I actually railed my friend. So I bubbled it, but a couple of my friends made the final table and my friend got heads up. So we were just railing that, just like, it was a really fun game to rail, honestly. And the person who bust in 5th, we only realized just after the hand that he mistakenly bust. He should have won the hand, but nobody of the 5 people or the dealer could read the board properly. Yeah, and that was brutal to realize, but that
What
just
the
kind of, yeah. So it was an unpaired board, and we didn't realize that he rivered run a boat, and we just thought that a straight was the winner. So he got eliminated with a boat. And my other friend, like after the hand railing with me, he's like, "Oh, he had a boat, didn't he have a boat? Like what's wrong?" Which is like, oh my god, this is terrible. We realized too late. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a fun game. So what have you found out about the starting hand ranking? Do you want to have like triple aces, or do you prefer like an ace king queen 3 hearts type of scenario?
I think triple aces by far. Like I think all. I was going to say rolled in
all trips.
In stud. If you have 3 cards that the trips to start with, you call them rolled up. So that was what we were calling them at the time. So yeah, I think trip aces has to be the best hand. Yeah, 3 of a suit definitely goes up in value a lot, but it still matters. Funnily enough, I actually bust that tournament with 3 cards ace high suit versus my friends 3 cards of an ace high suit in a different suit. I made an ace high flush. He made a better ace high flush of a different suit. So like that's how you think how absurd that game is. Yeah. So
yeah, so you can both make a different flush. It's like, I have a flush. Yeah, I have a flush as well. But the other 2 suits that are out there.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think it's actually.
Well, let's hope it gets popularized. It was fun.
It was really fun to play, and like even the Hold'em guys that it was like a $400 side event or something that they we had bust whatever 2K high roller was running on that day, and then just like jumped into this, and they all said they absolutely should run this like every night of the EPT. They should just have like a turbo 500 or 1K super Hold'em. Everyone would love it, and like genuinely I hope it gets introduced as like a really fun game. Yeah.
Adam, any experience playing Super Hold'em?
No, but you guys have sold it very well. I'm excited to play, to reel some friends into it, to see how long it takes them to figure it out.
Yeah.
But no, it seems like a nice hybrid format for you, Rene. And yeah, Benny, you've played a lot of games, so I'm sure you've played like similar games. But yeah, it seems like a lot of fun. I think anything that kind of levels the playing field, drives a bit of action, takes a little bit of figuring out, but also yeah, there's a lot of strategy there as well. It seems like a fun game. So yeah, interesting to see how it unfolds. All right, I want to take the conversation a little bit into a different direction, and I want to do a little rapid fire. So rapid fire is just going to ask you questions that will be generally a very short answer, and you just say whatever first comes to mind. All right, so first question, what is your most memorable bracelet win?
Has to be my first, I think. Yeah. just the most special. Yeah.
What is the scoop or WCOOP win that you've had that was the most underwhelming?
Just underwhelming. It had to be one of the lower ones where it's probably in the middle of a grind of a series where like I'd won a $22 limit event. I'm trying to think where I'd won like 9K. I can't think of what the event was. It's something like a $22 where I think I got first for like between like 7 8K, and it didn't get me even for the day. Like I was still down on the day and I was still annoyed even though I'd won an event. I was like, this is not how winning an event should feel. Yeah.
Feeling exhausted at the end of a grind.
Yeah.
Oh my God, didn't even get back.
Yeah.
Who's the strongest mixed game player in your opinion?
Well, I don't know if there's necessarily one in particular. But one of the top ones, I'd say, probably Matt Ashton.
This is going to be a hard one for you to answer because there's so many formats, but what is the most overrated poker concept for you?
Oh, okay. Concept, when you say concept in terms of what?
Could be blockers, it could be brain, I don't know, anything that comes to mind.
Okay, I'll say one that's divulging a bit. I'd say in limit games, keeping your range together can be important, but is overrated in terms of how much it actually matters, because it's still a limit game and it just doesn't matter enough. Where you want to not be transparent, but people can't actually punish you enough because of the limited nature. So it's still better than folding to just be like transparent, where you can't get punished for it as much in limit, even though people rarely do that.
Good answer. No limit hold'em, PLO, or Deuce 7. Which of those games teaches you the most about life?
I don't really know.
Which have you learned the most from?
I guess I feel like it has to be no limit hold'em, but it's for various reasons that probably not from like the game itself, but like probably how I've learned the game. I would say like single draw probably has more room for creativity, that it's cool if you want to think outside the box. But, well, I mean, no limit hold'em these days I'm finding a bit more robotic, as I said, for more memorization, so it's less teaching about life. But the way that I learned the games, where I've learned what variance is through no limit hold'em tournaments, you know, I'm understanding more about variance. I'm understanding results orientatedness from no limit, like very clearly throughout my, like these kind of things, trying to be more logically minded, trying to disregard results in various ways, all things that are probably quite easily illustrated in no limit. And there's just like such a depth and variety to them that there's a lot of capabilities to it. Yeah.
What's the strangest thing you've witnessed at a poker table?
My goodness.
Could be an outfit, someone bringing a monkey. I always see guys in Bali with snakes around the necks. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
An outfit, I don't know. So, there's so many things, like such a list. I don't know if I could distill one outfit. I've played it in a full bear costume twice. I like with claws. I think it'll probably be something outlandish, like people really tilting in certain ways. I think it was adjacent to me at the World Series where it was the year where a guy had like taken off some of his clothes, and also I think the same guy like threw his shoe at the dealer. I don't think I saw that, but I was witness to a lot of that. Oh God, even that. Well, that's kind of a tragic answer, but probably the most crazy thing was witnessing the panic of what we thought was a shooter in Vegas in the Stampede. That was probably the craziest thing. I was just sitting there playing in hand, and everybody's absolutely losing their mind. I think that has to probably take the cake.
It's funny, the last time I asked that question, it was the same answer. So it's a small poker
really?
world. There's a lot of guys in that room.
Yeah. I remember.
If poker disappeared tomorrow, what would you do?
Poker disappeared tomorrow, it would definitely be something to do with music, where I would, well, actually, you know what, because that depends a lot on where I live. I would probably go live somewhere that I really like actually wanted to live, and didn't depend on like my poker travels for it and poker regulations. Like, didn't depend on how much of a travel hub it is, didn't depend on time zone for scoops, things like that. So I'd want to live somewhere that's going to have a nice climate, and I would just probably move there, and then I would actually have a fixed place where I'm able to do things in music that I would like, where it's be a guitar teacher, form a band, work in a studio, like these kind of things I'd love to devote my time to in a nice, comfortable environment.
Amazing. Anywhere come to mind?
I don't know. There are places in Europe that I would, but because I haven't entertained them now because of either like regulations or time zone, but weather is an issue. So I would either like still maybe travel during the winter. Depends if I want to live somewhere just during the summer or not. So, I mean, there are so many places in Europe that I would like to live because I think are just great standards of living, like Denmark or somewhere just has a great standard of living, but there's just too much grayness and rain that it might be somewhere like Portugal, or might be somewhere a bit more exotic that I would try, like Costa Rica, that I've never tried to, but would want to look there. Or there are certain places I would like, even like Bali, for example, is a beautiful place, or somewhere in Asia.
Yeah, I've been here 10 years now. It's a nice place to be.
I
But yeah, I think for you, it feels like at some point you'll explore where you want to go without the poker restrictions, let's call it, or the poker practicalities. And yeah, from there, like, as you mentioned, the world will open up in terms of where you can spend your time. All right, well, you passed the rapid fire. We're going to now move into some reflecting questions. And just looking back on some of the things you've learned for your long career. So the first one is, what is the most important lesson poker has taught you that transfers into your everyday life?
It's really tough to just get one thing out. I mean, there's like really just so many things. I don't know how to kind of narrow.
Give us more.
Yeah.
Multiple's fine.
One main thing is hopefully my decision making, and also probably just overall the kind of logical, rational mind. So generally trying to be as logical and rational as I can in a lot of scenarios. And poker, I would like to think, has helped with that in terms of things like, you're trying to only focus on the things that are within your control, trying to not focus on things outside of your control, trying to ignore that and sort of consider that as noise or whatever, things that don't matter. So trying to focus only on the decisions that you can make and not necessarily on the results if you can have predicted something. So trying to make the decisions with the best results that you had at the time, and then because of that, be at peace with that? Or I think I misworded that. With the best information that you had at the time, and then because of that, how it was at the time, then sort of being at peace with the results for whatever happens. And if you couldn't have predicted the results, but they did go up badly, then trying to be at peace with that because that was all you could do.
I like it. It's like rational plus EV decisions and accepting probabilities to some degree. Yeah. All right. What is your definition of success? Or how has your definition of success changed as you've had more success in poker?
And do you mean in poker or just generally in life?
Generally, though I think poker might cloud it, but I'm interested to see what comes to mind.
Yeah, I was largely thinking of it as a poker perspective, and that's kind of difficult because like it's like metrics in poker where it's either kind of how much money you've made or your ability, like your relative ability, are probably the two main things where different people value those differently. They're subjective. Like some people think you're the best poker player because you've made the money, you get into the best games, whatever it is. Other people think you're the best because you're the best in terms of ability. So I think that's subjective. I think having a healthy balance of those is good. I should have probably strived more for my career in terms of profitability. That was probably actually one thing I was going to say to Rene's question earlier, that I should have done that more and try to get into sketchier games or whatever, like these kind of things that I think were going to be much more profitable for me and taking more risks in that regard, rather than just only trying to be better in terms of ability. And I think like that definitely would have made me more money. And like if I would have traveled to private games, or if I would have just moved to Vegas like 10 years ago, I'm sure that would have made me more money. If I would have just wanted to grind the cash games there, for example, for a long time, but wouldn't have made me so happy. So you can even measure like happiness as a metric for success too. All kind of balance in life. So I probably would think that it's some kind of straddling of in between. I think it's happiness is one of the main measurements of success, honestly. Yeah. And like if something you've achieved has like helped you be, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's almost like there's like a few components that go together. Obviously, there's a striving to achieve things. Generally, we think success is like achievement, and we link that very closely. But as soon as we start having success, we realize, that can't be it. Because like I've got to feel good, I've got to be happy on that pursuit. So then you start to balance it with, do I feel happy? Am I achieving stuff? Am I growing? Do I feel connected to the life I'm living? And there's like an interplay between like the achievements you're seeking and the happiness that you're living underneath that. So yeah, I think I always like to ask that question because I feel like it unlocks like in your own mind like what you're thinking through of what you're trying to achieve, because that's kind of the nature of a poker player is trying to achieve success, but then you're trying to balance that with a successful life in terms of a happy life. So yeah, I like that you came full circle, and I think it was a rounded answer.
So I was going to say people's goalposts move all the time for what they want to achieve and what they might deem successful. Like they might have achieved something and then still want to achieve the next thing after they've done that already and realize like that didn't make them happy, or they didn't quantify that as success, but they want the next thing, or like they're not successful enough, like these kind of things. So it's important to be able to recognize that, how it shifts, and when that changes, then the happiness is probably the kind of most important thing.
Yeah, I think as well with that, it's understanding like the games we play and when that game kind of fulfills its need. Let's say the money game or achievement game, there's a certain point where the threshold you get to gives you like most of the benefit. But if you just keep playing that game for more, there comes a point where it's like, okay, well, the game's showed you more's not going to do it. From the million to 10 million to 100 million, probably isn't going to change your life too much once your life's at a certain point. So I think just being understanding of the games you're playing at certain periods, and then reflecting and go, right now, based on where I am, what's the next game I want to play out that could seek? And overall, I think happiness will be the end route we end up at, even though we may come in from a different angle. I think if you're happy, you live a good life, you've got a good family, good friends, you feel every day, you wake up with a smile on your face, it's very hard to argue that's not a successful life. So yeah, even if you might have to tick a few achievement boxes along the way, I think, yeah, coming to a happy place is always going to be the end result, hopefully.
Absolutely.
All right. In your career, which part of your career has been the most enjoyable? You've had many phases, you've played many formats, live, online. Which part of your career did you enjoy the most?
Let's see, I think it was probably from around the years of like 2016 onwards. For that, probably a couple of years where I was still feeling like decent hunger and motivation for the game. And that was kind of the year that I like really kind of burst onto the scene a bit more, fully established, when I had won the 2 bracelets back to back. And then it like really felt like that was special. Like I've achieved something. I kind of belong here. I'm able to be in the World Series. I played like my first 50K PPC that year. Like that's like really exciting. It was still kind of fresh and new enough where it's exciting. I'm still like feeling motivated to do these things because I'm like seeing this progression. The kind of atmosphere around me is fun, where people are even like hyping me up or being friendly, like these kind of things, where it's just a really cool environment. And yeah, I think that carried on for some time. I think that was probably the most exciting, and where I felt like my ability and confidence was very high at that time as well.
So what motivates you to keep playing poker? You've won the 5 bracelets. You've got 20 plus Scoop and WCOOP trophies lying around. What drives you still to keep putting in the hours to poker?
Yeah, it's kind of a tough question for me because I don't necessarily feel as motivated as I used to. I wish I did, but yeah, the past couple of years, few years, I haven't as much as I'd like to. But these days, I still enjoy aspects of it, like the competition. I still enjoy kind of testing my ability, potentially still being one of the best, or seeing if I can still be one of the best in certain games, in certain aspects. And like the achievements of it, I think I still enjoy that, like enjoy the kind of exciting final table runs in the tournament, like these kind of things, those kind of exciting atmospheres, and even like the sort of recognition still as well is honestly a thing for me, in terms of like kind of validation from success is nice. I don't seek that as much as I used to. That used to be one of my kind of driving factors as well, as for like trying to really be one of the best for recognition and for people's opinions as well. That used to matter to me more than it does now. Now I try and not let poker tournaments rely on that so much and affect that so much. But overall, I think it still has like those aspects that I enjoy still around that, where whilst I'm still sort of near the top of the game in that kind of aspect around that, until I'm going to get in my old age, it's still kind of exciting to have those aspects around it.
We've had a long conversation today about mixed formats, your journey through poker. What would you like the listeners to take away from our conversation today?
Yeah, wow. I hope a lot of things that they will be able to take away. Both some mixed games, rules and strategies, and hopefully an encouragement to play some mixed games and try them out if they're new to them. As I said, I always encourage everybody to try them, both for fun and variety, and for hopefully expanding their poker brain and way of thinking. I would also hope that there are some kind of mental game things that they'd be able to take away on the kind of potentially the more serious side of whether it's being able to accept things within yourself to be at peace with. That would hopefully make your poker play more pleasant and cause you less suffering both during and after as well. And as well as things like hopefully how to play a scoop series and prepare for that, these kind of things. Hopefully there was some decent nuggets of advice in there. But really, I think some of the mental game type things are probably most important. Like a lot of those took me a long time to learn. So hopefully I've been able to pass on some good things there that I wish I had known earlier in my poker career.
Well, thank you for spending the last 3 hours with us. You've definitely opened up our eyes to mixed game formats. And as you mentioned, shared a lot of valuable lessons that you've learned over your career. So thank you so much for your time, and we appreciate you spending it with us.
Glad to hear it. Thanks for having me, guys. Take care. And thanks for watching.
What a great conversation that was with Benny. Adam, main takeaways from today's conversation?
Yeah, we touched on a lot of topics. One of the ones I enjoyed was around the series grinds. Benny's a bit of a legend of grinding the scoops and the WCOOPs, so I want to dive into his preparation, his advice for the tournament grinds, and it very quickly became obvious how much he approaches everything around environment, routine, very seriously. When he does a series, his whole life is basically a trade-off in terms of, is it going to help performance? He moves to Vancouver, he's on the same routine, he's always, we talk about his evening routines, he talked about unwinding during breaks. So I think for anyone listening, though his advice, as he mentioned, was tailored to himself, but all the questions he was asking about solving preparation, solving lifestyle, solving environments are very applicable. So I think anyone who's got a series grind coming up or looking to do them, if you want to do it professionally or do it to a high level, you've got to really take performance and lifestyle very seriously. So I think Benny was a good example of how to do that. I like the conversation we talked about overwhelm, and especially in final table scenarios. We did a good deep dive into that, and we kind of narrowed it down into expectations. As a tournament grinder, I work with a lot of tournament players myself on mindsets, and very often expectations are a real big hurdle. For most grinds, it's not as monumental, the big scores, but in tournaments, you've got this pay structure that just rises and rises. Come the final table, there could be life-changing money on the line. So it's very hard sometimes to not let the minds get attached to that narratives. But we talked about being okay with things not going your way, accepting things more. And then we also talked about judgment in terms of external pressures. He mentioned for himself, overwhelm generally kicks in when he's thinking about other people's opinions of him, wanting to look good, not make mistakes. He mentioned even post on social media that he's made a final table and how that became a negative because now he's got pressures and standards to hold up to. So I think we did a good deep dive into the experience of being a poker player, trying to get good results, but also trying to play your best and the challenge of that in a high stakes environment. So yeah, I really liked his way of breaking that down. I think he was well Rene put out some good examples of how to work past those kind of, understand the triggers, understand the responses, and do that kind of work in advance to reprogram that kind of response so that you feel more comfortable. And then he mentioned for himself as the most beneficial thing is experience and getting a lot of reps in. So although that isn't the advice to a up-and-coming player, he did mention that for him, being in that situation more frequently, being comfortable playing those final tables after many, many years has allowed him over time to feel less pressure, less overwhelm in those scenarios. So yeah, I think we did a good deep dive there. How about yourself, Rene? What were the main takeaways for you?
I wrote down, don't be afraid to look like an idiot. I think this was advice that he got from a buddy of him. And it was around, we were talking around experimenting with strategy, right? And thinking out of the box. And what he couldn't really point, he gave a couple of examples, but what happened there most was just thinking about the opportunities, right? It opened up his mind. So yeah, experiment with different strategies, over apply and then recalibrate to see what worked and get that feedback, right? Don't just stubbornly stick to that strategy. No, you're trying to get feedback. We talked a lot, obviously, about mixed games. I wrote down a couple of things. In limit games, it was very important to get the blinds out, right? That's what he said. For example, on the button, you just only 3-bet, for example, just to get the blinds up, because, you can often end up chopping. So then it's better to chop up the blinds with just 2 people instead of with 3 or 4. At PLO, we talked about the fact that, you need a stronger absolute hand, because, you now have 4 cards, equities run close together. He also talked about the fact that you don't really randomize in PLO. He said because you have 4 cards, so you have more information about the deck. So often your hand is being enforced by the other 2 side cards and how they interact with the board. If you have good blockers, unblockers, backup equity, whatever. Then we went to the high-low format, and there it was very important to know what your objective was. If you were likely gonna win on chop, so with the low, for example, he said you want to get as much people in the pot and chop up that money so there's more to chop up, or you want to bluff people off the chop, or obviously you want to scoop it. But yeah, to scoop it you need both hands, which is a bit harder to do, but that was the main strategic involvement. We also talked a little bit more about other games, but we got to Deuce to 7 triple draw, and that's where he said that's the game where talent shines through the most. So if you would want to measure no limit hold'em players purely on raw talent, put them in that game without any prior knowledge and see who's able to figure it out the fastest. We then also talked about Super Hold'em, great game, 3 whole cards. He mentioned he played in Cambodia. I mentioned I played it in a home game with friends. Great game. Do watch out for 4 of a kind, because that's literally not possible on any flop, right? So yeah, in general, I think we chatted about a lot of things. He gave a lot of great advice. Definitely you learned a lot to learn from. Thank you guys. You made it all the way towards the end. Like this video, subscribe to the channel. Remember, if you want to work with me and Adam, mechanicsofpoker.com. You can check that out. Shout out to our sponsors, GTO Wizard, CoinPoker. And I will see you guys in the next episode.